This part always makes the VOD a little awkward. I should really do is like put in lieu of actually editing my VODs properly. Maybe in the description of each of them, I should just put, "Hey, blah."
Makes sense. Makes sense.
You know. Oops, I'm scrolled way down. I was looking at the cards before we started. Felt like that should be a good idea.
That makes sense, but I feel like it's also a good idea for at least me to have not done so.
True, perhaps. Yeah, like I was just thinking about that, a mix of like,
knowing what's up and not.
yeah,
and having a fresh
maybe the
perspective.
host is the person who does know the most. Yeah, that rhymes.
The host knows the most, yeah.
Why isn't it? It's not showing me how many viewers we have. Well, whatever. At this point, let's just begin. So we are today going to go through the third and final part of the Babylos custom set commons design review. I think our roster today is the same as it was last time for the second part.
Mm-hmm.
So we need no interruption, but we need new. Never mind. Apparently, we do need interruption. We need no introduction, but I'm gonna do it anyways. I am Zoo, and with us we have Calibur.
Hello, hello.
And I'm Cleo.
Cool. And when any of us are talking, if things are too loud, too quiet, please shout that out in the chat. That would be great. We're gonna get started right now. We're gonna do green commons all the way through. Talk about green. We're gonna do the colorless commons all the way through. Talk about those. And then we're also going to, like I've said in the past, go through all of the uncommon and plus discoveries, because that's only where they appear. So our first card is Nomad's Resolve. It is green for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If that creature had a +1/+1 counter on it, untap it. This seems slightly underpowered for a typical green trick. I guess like +1/+1 counters aren't that hard to come by though in the set. So this is often going to be +2/+2 and untap, especially if you're in the right deck for it. A deck that we've seen a lot of signaling for in red, I think. What do we think about this?
I don't know how good untapping actually is compared to just getting the straight up additional +1/+1.
Of like a giant growth or something, because giant growth is not overpowered by any means. It's actually a very normal card.
Right. The only normally powered card of its cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like green usually gets larger buffs than this. This actually feels like a white card to me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, same exact idea.
I can see that. I don't feel the same, but I can certainly see that.
Well, these days green gets +3/+3 or bigger, or I believe that if I like even like looked through Frontier, unless it's off of something like support, and I might be wrong, and just misremembering that the green buffs either have a kicker to go for more, or they're like the smaller ones, or they're removing a -1/-1 counter, or it's an actual set keyword, which is why it's less than 3.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying this is just, it's a little bit conditional for not very much bonus.
I'm saying it doesn't feel green to me.
Yeah.
Or I meant in general,
the
we're
result
saying
is greater than +2/+2, even if that requires a condition, and if you don't have the condition, it's not.
Right. If this was +2/+3, which is, I'm not saying you should do that, but that would make it feel green to me. If this was +3/+3 and untapped with a counter, if it cost 2 mana and gave +3/+3 and untapped with the counter, like all of those things make it feel green to me. But the numbers just the +2/+2 doesn't feel green to me these days.
Yeah, it's very strange. When we think about this though from a design perspective, I was saying before that +1/+1 counters are not going to be that difficult to come by. Do we think does untapping a creature that's endured, like that's a little cool like flavor thing going on here as well? But from like I'm trying to win the game, how does this help me? Does that feel like in general that's going to feel like a worthwhile thing to do?
Well, if the Endure deck if it's like a race, then untapping is obviously going to be a strong ability, because it'll allow you to block, and so you can attack without reservations, or at least without as many reservations.
Mm-hmm.
But in any other circumstance, that untapping really isn't going to matter.
Yeah, like if you're grinding them out, for example, just spending your mana efficiently, getting like pings from the red creature, or you'll see later there's one that's going to gain you life when you endure. If you're grinding them out, this doesn't really do that much, and I'm saying, I think that will be what's happening most of the time.
So what I want to suggest is, if that creature had a +1/+1 counter on it, put an additional +1 counter on it.
Ooh, interesting.
I mean, they could do that and untap it, and that feels very green now.
Okay.
I mean, that's starting to get a little complicated, but you know, I think at that point you just want to redesign the card built around the idea that, hey, it gets bigger forever. You know, if you were trying to reserve both of those, the untapping and the thing. But yeah, that's certainly a viable design path. Do we have any other comments on this card?
No, I'm good.
All right, I have my only minor thing is that the name might make people think that like it's going to have something to do with specifically nomads, like it's going to be a nomad tribal thing.
Right.
Which
well,
is
it
not.
Is kind of Endure tribal, and Endure are mostly
It's
nomads,
connected.
Right?
Yeah, it's not like a fail, but it's like, maybe that'll cause a little
Sure.
confusion. You know?
Sure.
Cool, but let's move on to the next card. We have the Urud Clan Drover. It is green for a 1/1 creature human nomad. And for 3 and a green, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this is, among all the other pay mana to get plus counters when attacking with Endure, we're also getting a creature that specifically, that's all it does, is just continue to get bigger forever and ever and ever, as long as they're willing to pay 4 mana each time. I think this is... Well, you use it differently, but in terms of what it looks like it does,
no,
it looks like it does
agree,
the same thing.
But the effect of it is quite different.
Yes. Yeah. Which I also think is a bad thing, though.
Why is that bad?
I think it just like kind of muddies the design. Because if you're saying this is what getting bigger is in the set, that's you're having people say you're putting all these creatures. They're saying by being aggressive you can get your creatures bigger, and this creature's saying no, you don't really need to do that. You know, and if this is playable in any way, it's like somewhat undercutting the idea of the mechanic. You know.
There's also the fact that this can be a combat trick, essentially. And normally when you have this sort of thing, it's like gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Activate only once per turn in green specifically.
Yeah.
But in this case, you have permanent gain from it in addition to it being a combat trick.
Yeah.
Well, I like having other +1/+1 counters in the set besides just the mechanic. I don't think you want a ton of it, but I do like having some amount of it. I don't know if this is the best implementation of that, but if this is like the only other green card that can put counters on itself besides Endure cards, then in that scenario, I do like the card. Then the question comes for me: does every green deck want a 1-drop that can grow like this? Because we had the artifact in Kaladesh Limited. There was a 2-mana. I don't remember if he was a 1/2, a 2/1, or a 2/2. But we had a 2-mana guy who had this ability. Costed the same. And having access to him in every green deck, I mean, that was a different format, but it did have a fair amount of +1/+1 counters matters. You had the common creatures that put it on themselves with the enter. No, those ones made tokens. There's the other set, right, like the Rhinoceros who made tokens on himself. My point is being that I do like having another way to get the counters on creatures.
Mhm. Yeah, and that probably is a good thing, right? Like if you're gonna put +1/+1 counter synergy, you want that to be something that people can come at from multiple angles.
I really don't know
Otherwise,
that I
it's
like the
just
specific design for
no.
this set.
I also did. I also don't like
Well,
it. And what I was talking about before about undercutting design is that yeah, that it's also like a mana sink. That like it's too similar in that regard as well.
well, what is green doing in its colors? So green white is supposed to be ramp. Green white ramp would want a mono sync like this, but
Mm.
this could come somewhere else in the curve. This could be a 3 mana 2/2 or a 2 mana 1/2 or
Yeah.
similarly. Um, Black green mid range, green blue, which is essentially also a ramp deck. So these are all decks that do want a mono sync
Eh,
of some kind.
it's like it functions, but it's like if it's supposed to be 5-color splash ramp, it's like yay, green for a 1/1. That's what I want to be playing in my 5-color deck.
No, you'd be playing him as a backup so that what you're saying with this card then is that this is something that's going to table that all of these decks will get access to one of. That if they don't find something else, like, oh, you were in green, you have a free mono sync. You'll get at least one of these.
It's so boring.
Sure, I don't necessarily disagree with that, and I don't. We haven't looked through all of green, and I haven't looked through all of green, and so I think that for me, it also depends on, well, do we have 3 other mono syncs? So in that case, this probably shouldn't be here. Do we have 3 other creatures that are also putting, or even one other creature that's also putting counters on itself that's not endure? Then I don't necessarily need this. But if he's functioning as both a mono sync and another way to quote unquote like get an endure counter,
Mm.
then I like the design. But I mean, at what mana cost can you have this? What power toughness to mana cost ratio is this interesting at?
Oh, you mean like as opposed to a 1-drop, it's a 2-drop or a 3-drop or something like that?
This ability on an otherwise vanilla card, at what mana cost does he get super interesting? Like if he's a 4 mana 3/3?
I mean, I do enjoy that makes it more immediately becomes super relevant when you start to pay in.
Totally, yeah.
Because with this, it's like, well, it's a green
True.
for a 1/1, irrelevant. Then I pay again, it's a 2/2, kind of relevant. 3/3,
On turn
whatever.
4 at the earliest, it's a 2/2.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's never ever ever relevant until you've activated the ability like 4 times, right?
Well,
2 times, really. But really 3 times.
But not relevant. I meant relevant enough to have been worth it to have paid that much mana.
Mm.
You know, like getting a 3/3 out of this is like, oh yes, that's relevant on board, but was it worth
more
the amount of mana?
That is assuming you're not using it as a combat trick and like ignoring the effect of having
That's true.
that kind of combat trick on the battlefield.
It's true. Like okay, if you're in like a flash deck and you're saying, hey, this is a bigger blocker than you think it is. Threat of activation and all that. I mean, none of the colors are like supposed to be flash, but we've seen like a really good flash, common blue.
Oh, have we? I wasn't.
The turtle. When it enters the battlefield, you can swap its PT until end of turn. So it can be like a 1/4 blocker, surprise blocker, or a 4/1 surprise blocker.
Blue actually has a considerable number of like instant things to be doing at 3 and 4 mana, because I believe there was another. No, there was a 4 mana instant speed make a 2/2. If you've cast another spell this turn, it costs 2 less to cast, and so it'll clock into the same mana cost if you're pairing it with like Opt or something like that. And then there was also the 3 mana counter spell which had Scry. And so all of those add up to.
So there are things to hold up with this ability.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And like having a counter spell in my deck. I mean, if this was a 2 mana 2/1 with this ability, which is actually like I think considerably more pushed, which might not be the direction you want to go, like the 4 mana 3/3 or the 5 mana 4/4, 5 mana 3/4. I like it being a base. I actually like the PT being even. Certainly makes it simpler.
Definitely. I think it'd probably be like a 5 mana 3/3 with 3 mana to put the counter. Maybe that would be like another viable design.
Excessive.
Yeah. Well,
No, not as like a hey, please change this to that.
so
but like that's
so we
another
agree
place
that we
this
like
design
having
could have been.
another creature in the set that puts counters on itself, like one other one in green. There might be 4, which would be way too many. So, but we don't love the execution of this.
Yeah.
I think putting counters on itself in the same way as this one, even with the numbers switched around, I I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think there are other ways it could be done that would be cool.
Yeah. So, and to bring it back to the mana sink nature of this, one of the things that I would want personally in supporting civilized, because it's kind of hard to make a lot of common just artifacts, but you can also do a lot of equipment. And we've seen a lot of equipment. We're going to see a green common equipment. We're probably going to see 1 or 2 in colorless. That's another source of mana sink, right? This is fighting for more than just the already existing mana sink mechanic. You know? Just wanted to bring that up.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, that's fair.
Do we have any other thoughts on this? We went on for that one for a little while.
Just a little bit.
All right.
Maybe 20 minutes.
Cool. Let's move on. We have the Blustering Sandling. It is 1 and a green for a 1/1 creature elemental. It has flash, 2 mana flash creature. And when it enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So if you are just playing this in your main phase, it's a 2 mana 1/1. If you're using this to flash in as a blocker against an attacker, it's a 2 mana 3/3 blocker. It's effectively a, what is that? Perfect timing or whatever?
Impeccable timing?
Yeah, it's an impeccable timing.
That leaves behind a 1/1.
That might leave behind a 1/1. So
You're right.
often will. I do not like this.
I like it in theory, but I don't know that it's healthy for the environment.
I also don't understand what it is doing in the environment. Like, obviously, we were talking a little bit, oh, hey, there's like some cool green-blue flashy stuff going on. I mean, that's not the archetype, but that's fine. You know, there's allowed to be a little bit of that. This doesn't really fit into that.
I think I know how to just make it like work as is. If it were just a 2/1 and when it enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Because then it's less likely to survive and more usable when you're not flashing in as a surprise blocker. Yeah.
I don't
I'm
know.
sticking with that.
I just don't know. I don't like what this does to environments.
Yeah, no. The more we talk about it, the more I agree. I don't think that like having, from what we've seen and what we've played of the environment, I don't think that this is fully supporting what Green is trying to do. I think that there might be another set where I would like this.
Okay.
But in this set with our green pairs, my guess is that there might have been a green-blue flash archetype before the green-blue 5-color archetype, and this is a bit of a remnant of that. It's kind of my
I
guess
would not
here.
be surprised.
BRB.
Because the design of it, in my mind, I do like the design, actually. But I don't feel like it necessarily fits what we're trying to do. Because like in my green-white ramp deck, if I'm actually a ramp deck, what I'd like to be doing in turn 2 and 3 is ramping, scrying, fixing my mana in some way.
Putting down creatures that will be blocking for a long time.
Right, and I will certainly play this in that deck, but then I'm less of a ramp deck and more of a mid-range deck, right? I guess those are pretty similar, and the mid-range deck is black-green.
I mean, that's often just what happens in Limited, too. But you certainly shouldn't design for that to be the case. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. But with that said, for when you're watching this, Matt, I actually really like the design of this card. I'm not convinced this is the right limited format for it, or that it encompasses what we're trying to do with green here. Like, there could be another format where it being the design Kaladin suggested, a 2-mana 2/1 who flashes in as a 3/2, is very online with what we're doing in green, or a 2-mana 1/2 who flashes in and becomes a 2/3 blocker.
Righto. Well, Calibur's away momentarily, but I think we can move on to the next card. Right?
The next card being
Day of Rest. So Day of Rest is 1 and a green for an instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures with no +1/+1 counters on them. So this is a sometimes
this would be better
one-sided-ish fog. Sorry?
I think it would be better if it said without rather
Oh,
than with
without
no.
plus counters on them?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I think this is cool. We saw a very similar card in Lorado in white, if I remember. That cared about, if I remember correctly, plus counter or aura or equip. A very versatile card. I don't know. Fogs often do more like signaling work than they do actual work.
Right.
In terms of just like they're not good, but they can tell people, hey, this is what this color is caring about. It says, hey, we're caring about plus counters. And I think the fantasy that this has the player envision is also cool. And especially, I think this is actually going to happen not amazingly often, but I attack with a creature, I endure it, I play this. The same kind of thing we were talking about with other combat tricks before, where it's, oh, I'm attacking just because I want to spend my mana. I don't have anything going on. But oops, no, actually I had a trick. Opponent, you fool. And this does a similar thing. But I don't think that'll actually happen very often. At all.
Fogs don't work out very often in limited in general.
Yeah. We'll see if this could be a format that's different for.
Especially one-sided fogs are more likely to work out than
Yeah.
two-sided fogs.
I mean, how often are you going to have two creatures on the battlefield that have plus counters and not be like winning the game enough that you don't need this? You know what I mean?
But this can also just serve as a blowout even if you only have the one.
I mean, that's not a blowout, is it?
Yeah.
It's not a blowout, you're right.
Like, it would be if they multi-blocked. But most of the time, it's not. It's going to be trading one for one.
I think that you have to. Not every card can be your first pick or a second pick, and then having a card that does express the themes I do like, it does help the drafters like kind of see what's going on.
I agree.
I think that on a playability level, this is far below playable.
Yeah.
Because there's also then there's like the other side of it of, well, let's say I was like a blue-green 5-color deck who has a fair amount of card draw, and so like, and this isn't going to happen every draft or every 2 drafts, or every like 5 or 6 drafts. Like you could end up in a blue-green deck that is like, you know what, a fog's really going to help me out. It's going to like literally be a time walk because there's so much effing card draw that I can afford to play a fog or two, and it's actually going to really help my game plan.
But what's kind of weird about that, though?
The problem with that deck doesn't even want this card.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too risky. And so the only deck that's playing this card is the super heavy on Endure deck, or out of the sideboard. Out of the sideboard, if I'm green red Endure and you are some, I don't know, white black aggro civilized deck, which like definitely could happen, I'll bring this in. But then I don't know.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that it correctly expresses everything. It's not a priority to redesign, but it is something that I would look at of like, well, is there a way to make it a little bit more playable?
Well, I mean, I was thinking from the perspective of that's the only deck that can play it has feel bads when it does. Like we were saying, like you're going to be playing against the Endure deck because you're not the one Endure deck. I think that does mean it needs to be redesigned.
I mean, I wonder if it could just be creatures you don't control. Wait, how would you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn?
Except by creatures you control with plus counters on them.
Yes. And I think that small redesign actually goes a pretty far way to make the card feel better.
I see.
And to give it a few more, it's not even like that nuts.
No,
right?
That does not make it even that much better.
Right.
Cool. I don't have anything else to say other than cool flavor. Love it.
Yeah, cool flavor, nice art.
Yes, the flavor text is neat.
All right, let's move on to the next card. We have the Mangrove Cultivator. It is 1 and a green for a 1/2 creature human druid. Taps for green. It's a very, very, very simple mana dork that blocks 1/1 vigilant tokens. I think that's really the only kind of relevant thing to say about what it does.
Yeah, I I think otherwise it acts just like a mana dork. I guess okay. There is something to say. Do you really want it to only add green because this set has a 5-color archetype?
Mmm.
And it's a 1/2. I was in a comment on it being a 1/2 is like
That too.
it's
A little
pretty.
under par.
Yeah, it's pretty under par, and the stat line's like really under par in this set.
Mm.
And so I would be like, my suggestion was going to be pushing the stat line, but
Mm.
pushing the mana it makes might actually be more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like it could just tap for green blue. I think you could just do that at common here, and I think that'd be fine. Maybe not.
Could it tap for any color?
Yes. I mean, if I remember correctly, the last time they did that it was 3 mana in like Battle for Zendikar or something, or Oath.
Oh, we had the
I
Naga.
personally think that you can do that at 2 mana. It just does weird things because a 2 mana dork is playable in a lot of green decks, not just like the devoted ramp decks. And maybe that just provides too much fixing to other decks. You know, like it wouldn't be a low enough pick such that it's only mostly going to blue-green or something like that.
Yeah, but it is only a 1/2, and this is a format where like.
I
You know,
mean,
this
like we're
isn't-
saying, you're
this-
not using this for the body as much. You know. I don't know. Like maybe this is something to explore for like the main ability adds green, and then there's a second ability that like maybe filters for any mana. Like one end tap, add 1 mana of any color. I could see
Yeah.
that.
Just my point with the body is that the other decks that are going to play that might play this in this format would really want this to be a 2/1 who taps for green.
Of
And
course.
we had Druid of the Cowl recently who was a 1/3, and so if we keep the stat line at 1/2, I think that pushing the mana build. I'm just repeating what I said already. Yes, I agree with you. Making it mana of any color or adding a filter to it, I think are both fine. Or making it 1/3.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cool.
Moving on.
We got on that one? All right, let's move on. We have Strike Down, not to be confused with Cut Down, which also featured art of this character. 1 and a green for a sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. That creature fights target creature you don't control. So this is Epic Confrontation, 1 less toughness. Still probably a pretty good card.
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, like really, it's fine. It's totally fine. It could be like mildly better, but it doesn't have to be. Epic Confrontation felt like slightly off and a little too good when it came out to me,
Yeah,
at least.
I agree.
I do want to make a point that the flavor text has a little glitch to me, or like it doesn't read very well to me.
It doesn't
even
make
what it's saying.
sense as well with the flavor of this card, which is I'm fighting a sandworm. And the flavor text is, oh no, a sandworm is here. This is bad.
That's true.
You know?
I actually am interested in this power down because Epic was so good, and like yes, there's a lot of power creep in Magic, but all of the creature power creep is like on par with each other,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that you don't need just because you could make it a confrontation. I like that this is showing restraint on that and saying that this is all it needs. I like
Yeah.
this card.
No, I definitely don't think it like needs to be changed into it. I just wanted that as a point of comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in terms of like what this does, it's kind of difficult to. It doesn't really do anything in specific, I don't think. It's just a green card.
I mean, it's cheap, efficient removal and green at common. Like
Yeah.
this might be the best removal spell we've seen so far.
Sure, but I think most sets have that sort of thing.
Oh, totally. But I mean, some sets it's a 4-mana 1, right? And in some
Sure.
sets it's Prey Upon, like a 1-mana 1 that is a little bit worse. Actually, I think this is better than Prey Upon. In
Probably.
some sets it's Rabid Bite, and I think Rabid Bite's a little bit better than this, but not by a ton.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a 4-mana 1, and it's not a Prey Upon. So I just mean that from what we've seen, I do think this is the best removal we've seen so far.
Hmm.
No, that's not true.
There was
There's the
a
1 mana.
there was like a shock in red.
Yeah, the shock was the best one.
It's pretty darn
The
good.
shock scry is the best removal we've seen. I take that back.
Yeah. So I don't have anything else to say on this one.
Me neither.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Cool. Next card we have the Trusty Camar. It is 1 and a green for a 2/2 creature antelope camel, and it has endure for green. Obviously, my first comment is going to be the fact that this is an antelope camel with excellent, excellent art. This is great.
It does have the horns of an antelope. I was thinking, does it just want to be a camel mutant? But no, it does not.
No, this is so cool. As for the card itself, seems pretty good. It's just a bear when you need it to be. It's a 3/3 when you need it to be. Just a solid green. Yet another card that's just saying like, hey, endure is good. You should accept it into your life.
I think this is among the best endure cards we've seen yet, just because like both modes are quite efficient.
Mm-hmm. And especially when it comes to like working with the synergy cards, the fact that this is both extremely low risk, it's a bear, and the endure cost is cheap, which means it's very easy to work in with other endure payments, because occasionally you'll want to like pay multiple endures on a single turn, and having this to be just 1 mana that's so flexible. So just a good bedrock for what's going on there, and otherwise just a cool card.
You don't really need to worry about it, but like watch it.
Oh yeah.
I'm good. I like the card. I think it's good.
All right.
It's interesting that our flagship endure cards are not the nomads. The best ones are animals. It's the high camel.
That's
and
true.
I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I just have to make a comment or a critique, right?
Of course.
Right. Do we have anything else to say about this?
Nope. All right, let's move on. We have Collapse the Pillars. It is 2 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. So a functional reprint of a lot of cards we've seen before in Magic. Awaken the Bear, Crash the Ramparts. Just a very typical green trample combat trick. What do we think?
There's nothing wrong with this.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, the more we look at it, I don't particularly like that both the green combat tricks I would define as kind of mediocre.
I was thinking the same thing. They're both and they're both kind of small too. There's like 3/3/3 is the largest one, and both like temporary.
Mm-hmm.
If this one was something to do with counters, it would be fine, I think, in that regard. But they just feel too similar, almost.
I definitely agree.
And I think there's a lot of room in green combat tricks that we've seen these days. Like anything from one of them could be a hexproof, to one of them can be an aim high variant, to what you were suggesting of putting counters on the creature. Like I'd even be okay with an expensive rampant growth tacked onto one of them. Like I just mean like there's other things that
there's a lot of little upsides you can give.
Yeah, and right now they feel a little bit too same to me.
And plain, for this one at the very least. I think in terms of like working around with Endure, I do like having one of the tricks be 1 mana. Obviously we had all those critiques on the other one, but as for this, I almost want it to be like 4 mana to say like, hey, this is for a different deck. This is for a deck.
Actually, something defensive could be good. Something to like help against Endure. Or if it were 4 mana, it could gain +3/+3 and trample and untap it, so that it can block next turn.
Well, what are our green decks doing again, right? We have green blue, which is a 5-color ramp deck, so that means this could be a card that makes treasure. We have black green mid range, so that would want like an aim high, right? Like something that blocks, that deals with multiple types of blockers.
Or something that like gives it the ability to block an additional creature.
Yeah, that would be good.
When's the last time we had that in green?
It's been a few times in Frontier.
Okay.
I don't know if we've seen it on a trick. I don't remember any.
Or I mean, or like block menace. If there's some way for my one creature to get reach to block menace, I don't know how that would work, but
I
I
mean,
feel as though there's
right.
yeah,
Right,
or
because
or
you can
wait,
double block the
in
menace
casual
creature, but still block another creature.
casual, I think brings up a really good point here that because endure is a green mechanic and a primary green mechanic, that maybe another attacking buff is good. At which point, seeing something that leaves counters or something that gives hexproof, wasn't there like even if this was 3 mana +3/+3 in hexproof, which I think we saw in Shadows, that's a card that I will play in my endure deck and spend a whole card on sometimes.
Mm.
I think having one of the tricks leans towards the endure deck and one of the tricks leaned away from
Mhm.
them is a good idea.
Right, because we think that there's essentially green red endure, green black is mid range, but they both have endure, so they're clearly going to have +1/+1 counters matter stuff. And then green blue and green white aren't really close to endure, right?
Right.
No. I mean, that's why I was saying 4 mana would be interesting because that's more likely to be played in green white or something,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is cool.
Well, if it made a treasure token,
Mm.
then having it be a cheaper combat trick that you're trying to slough out of your hand early might be interesting. But maybe you don't want treasure tokens on your
What?
combat tricks.
Yeah, it
I
just
don't
sounds a
I
little
don't
awkward.
understand the design or the purpose of the design that you're suggesting.
Because both blue green and blue white, both
Or green white.
blue green and green white
They they
are
want to
ramping.
ramp.
They're both ramping,
Right.
and treasure is a supported mechanic in the set.
Yeah, I don't think you really want to waste combat tricks like that. You kind of want to hold them up for when they're relevant, generally speaking, right?
Yeah, but if it's a cheaper, if it's a combat trick that you can get value out of early,
Mm. I
and
mean,
then can
like
help you cast your expensive card.
the game plan of ramp already is like a 2-step process. I don't want hey,
Yeah,
also
that's fair.
find
That's fair.
a way to use a combat trick to be another
Right.
detour in that process, you know. All right. So we gave a lot of different possibilities there. Do we have anything else to say about this? I guess we were mostly talking about
Um,
this slot, really.
I don't understand the flavor even for the current design, but also it looks like neither do you, which is fine.
I know what the reference is,
Right. By you,
but
I mean Matt. I mean, yeah, I
ah,
know it's
I mean,
Hercules, but
no. I think it's Samson.
Samson? Oh, oh, right, okay. Still, I don't. Yeah, I guess I don't know that story very
I
well.
mean, the insert flavor text here, you know.
Yeah, what I'm
There's
saying is
going to be some sort of explanation, yeah.
right.
the name implies it could almost be a naturalize,
It's true.
Yeah,
like a
definitely.
choose one.
Very easily.
It's true. All right. Anything else?
Nope.
I'm good. I like the art.
Cool. Our next card is Cradle of Civilization, which is a name that needs to exist in this set. So thank goodness it does. 2 and a green for an enchantment aura, enchant land. When Cradle of Civilization enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. Enchanted land has tap, add 2 mana in any combination of colors. So this is an exact functional reprint of a Hour of Devastation card, Gift of Paradise. Or was it
And how right
Amonkhet?
you are. How right you are that it was our next art because this is just perfect.
Yeah, this is a good art for this set.
Well, I
And the
want to
card.
start by saying that I no longer want the green 2-drop to tap per mana of any color. I don't want to have two commons that do that. And so whatever other suggestions we gave for that were the ones that I would move towards. I like this card being in the set. I like that you have life gain tacked onto it. I like the art. And I like that instead of it being when it taps, I like that it produces 2 mana of any color. It does a lot in one card.
Yep, and it'll do exactly the same job in. Once again, was it Amonkhet or was it Hour?
It must
Probably
have been Amonkhet.
Hour.
Well, Hour had the 5-color deck, and they were doing similar things to this.
But Hour was also kind of apocalyptic, so this wouldn't be really thematic. So I'm not sure. Just
Weird.
based on guessing.
Well, but it does the right things that deck also kind of wanted to do. The kinds of things that we're looking at the blue-green deck in this format to do, which is good. I don't think we have anything else to say.
Yeah, we're good.
Cool. The next card we have is the Disciple of the Delta. 2 and a green for a 3/2 creature Naga Druid. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1. It's just a decent green creature with not very amazing art.
Yeah, that art could use an upgrade. I think it's just a pretty good creature.
Yep.
And I don't think there's much more that we need to say about that.
I mean, in terms of where you're putting something like this on the curve, it's 3 mana, which is like it's drawing you into like your 4th land in the green-white deck, for example. Just a little bit extra card selection in green, I think makes a lot of sense. If we're doing like green, white, green, blue ramp stuff.
Is scry actually a set mechanic?
No. Have you noticed like a lot more scry than normal?
No. Seeing scry on green outside of a set where it's a set mechanic, I actually think doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen that often, but I
But
think
certainly
it
something that
totally
can be done.
I'm not sure. Can you give me an example
I
of
mean,
when it is?
scry is a 5-color mechanic. Like scry is done in every color.
I'm saying in a set where it's not a set mechanic.
Yeah, no, it is done in every color.
It's a 5-color mechanic and it's evergreen.
Like you throw it on anything you want, and it would not be a break or a bend.
Right.
Like it just feels most at home in blue, of course.
Yes, and it's used significantly in red. Also,
It's actually not.
it's not
I looked
used
at the
as
stats
much.
for this. Yeah, they toned
really?
it down a lot in red.
So
It's a lot.
just
It's
as
a lot
much
of.
as other
It's a lot of
colors?
blue, and then black white use it most after blue.
Really?
If I remember
Like-
correctly from the stats.
Huh. That's.
But yeah, it's a very flexible tool. I have no
Yes.
problems with this.
So how many other cards does scry appear on
A lot.
Yeah.
in this set?
Oh, I could search. We could search that up.
Good.
I haven't noticed that much scry. We saw like the incidental that was kind of a little weird
It's not
on
a
the
set
burn
thing,
spell.
we can say that much.
Yeah. I honestly like haven't even seen like that many other like ETB scry or like activated ability scry. Are you thinking that increasing the amount of it would actually like make this feel less weird?
I'm looking at scry. I'm looking on Scryfall right now at the sets where scry appears in green, and so far all the sets that I looked through, it has only appeared in green when it also appears in every other color at least once.
Sure.
Well, it's allowed to appear in green. There's not any problem with it appearing in green. Are you just saying that it feels weird?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess I just have to disagree. But
I also disagree.
something to look into, Matt. Maybe do some some market research. Right? Oh,
You
and to
ready to
clarify,
move on?
like a Drake, I was talking about in standard, not like all time. Where all time it is a lot more in red. Cool. Are we good on that one?
Yes.
Let's move on. We have Lay the Foundations. It is 2 and a green for an instant. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put an artifact, creature, or enchantment card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into your graveyard. So this is one more variant on a lot of the different kinds of sift from the top few cards for some sort of permanent card that we often see in green. This one, of course, directly tying into the civilized set mechanic, bringing you one of any of the civilized pieces. It feels a little weird having green, not having green be a color that has civilized in it, but not that weird because dual color decks exist. Part of me a little bit wants this, a little bit wish this could grab lands for something like blue-green.
That's true. But then it would kind of ruin the reference to civilization, or civilized rather.
It would.
I really like the flavor text.
A single brick is all it takes to begin a civilization. Referencing the mechanic name.
Well, I do like that. It is kind of weird that it doesn't pull a land, but I do like it does. This does work for me because of the civilized mechanic. But then I do wonder, just because we can do it and it does work, should we? When green does not care about civilized unless it's paired with a civilized color,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
because this could be a ramp spell. This
Well,
could be a card for
yeah.
your ramp deck. This could be a card for your blue-white deck. And so the more I'm talking about it out loud, I would rather see it go that direction, I think.
You could just add land onto it. That would be fine. It would still say artifact, creature, or enchantment.
It's true.
I mean, at that point, it's just permanent card, right? It's
Well,
Not
non-planeswalker,
planeswalkers.
right?
But yeah.
but the point is, it says artifact, creature, and enchantment, and that's the part that matters.
You're saying just adding land on. Hey, the reference is still there. Also,
Yes.
it does the thing that green does, which is search for lands.
Right. Exactly.
It is interesting that it puts them into the graveyard and that it's an instant. Those are both things that on these style of cards we don't always see. We sometimes do. I'm just pointing out that that is interesting to me.
I feel like there used to be like a bigger there used to be a bigger graveyard focus in this set. This is probably a remnant of that. I personally don't think it's necessary at all, unless
Yeah,
there's
I
like
would
a lot
prefer them
more.
on the bottom. And
Yeah.
in fact, putting them on the bottom would kind of tie into the flavor because
Oh my
laying the
God.
foundation. You're putting it on the bottom.
Uh-huh.
But the black deck certainly, like, it's going to have at least one common raised dead from, because
Right.
it had two when we looked at it. The black deck's certainly interested in the graveyard part, and the blue deck is certainly interested in the instant part, because then this can play, like if I'm holding up Lay the Foundation and a counter spell, it's significantly better than just holding up one of the two.
I mean, I guess that gets into a little bit of like the philosophy of draft development when you have an archetype that is just mid-range. Is that something you even need to consider? Right? Like you do have to consider
Yeah.
these colors will be being played together. Is there bad stuff that's happening? But is there like, do they hold any sway even when it comes to, like, this is how the card synergizes? You know?
Just things to consider.
Like, and I honestly think the feeling of it, like putting at the bottom, the improvement in the feeling for that is worth the loss of synergy for a deck that doesn't really, quote, matter, quote. You know?
That's fair. That's fair.
Anything else to say about this?
No.
No,
Oh, well,
move
we
on.
could talk about a little about the instant sorcery. I don't really know of any reasons why it would be one or the other. Obviously, we have seen like the little bit of extra instant stuff happening in blue and green before, so that's probably a good thing. You know?
Sure. I like it being an instant.
Yeah. It's also 3 mana. That's kind of a hard commitment for sorcery.
Right.
You know? Yeah. So, but other than that, I think we're good to move on. Our next card is the Skittering Solifuge. 2 and a green for a 2/3 creature. Gets you an insect spider. Okay, that's a little weird. I feel like that should just be a spider. Anyways, it has reach. And that's it. So, this is often just a 3 mana 2/3. This is
It's a decent curve
often
filler.
a card that walls out very, very small flyers. Like I guess like probably the big one is the 2/3 that gains flying on civilized. That just bouncing off of this is pretty important, I think. Just especially because this goes into so many more decks than a giant spider necessarily does. Just like acting as curve filler,
Right,
even when you're not interested in like the walling out flyers aspect as much.
But just incidentally walling out flyers on a curve filler is pretty good.
Yeah. So I'm saying
And
that, but I'm saying therefore that has a lot of impact on the environment, I think.
yeah, and like having something that is, it's not like a high pick or anything. It's just a curve filler, but so every green deck will have access to it, but it's also not like it's not something that'll necessarily go only to the people who specifically need it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just incidentally there.
Yeah.
As for the insect spider thing, I believe the reason for that is that there was a card, a Solifuge card printed in original Ravnica that was an insect. But Solifuges are an arthropod that is like pretty closely related to spiders, but they aren't spiders.
Mhm.
And
So is that what
it's
this
an insect.
is?
Yeah, that's what this is supposed to be.
Like this art represents that?
I don't actually know very well what solifuges look like, but the flavor text specifically mentions solifuges and their doings
That's
in
just
the desert.
weird.
So yeah, it's an insect because in Magic, solifuges have the insect type, or solifuge has the insect type line.
Mhm.
But it's a spider because arthropods who look basically like spiders, as far as I know.
Mhm. So do we think that the format needs a like very readily playable thing to wall out flyers, or would we prefer that flyers be more often something that is reliably ending the game?
Oh, and just by the way, if you're arachnophobic, don't look up solifuge.
Oh, I feel like most people would already know not to do that.
That's reasonable. Anyway, they look kind of different than spiders, so this is clearly not technically representing one, but it's not.
Oh my gosh. All right, what do we think? What does this do to the format? Do we like what it does, or do we not like what it does?
I honestly almost feel like I need to see more of it together, even though we've looked at so much of it.
Mm,
It's hard for me to tell because a lot of that is like asking, well, what is green doing in the format?
Sure.
Well, if I am trying to support a black-green mid-range deck and a green-white ramp deck and a green-blue ramp deck,
I mean,
if,
yeah,
if I'm trying to support all three of those,
green is super slow. It
then
looks
So
like.
right, and I'm saying in all of those scenarios, I'd rather have a bigger spider.
if there's a plummet, then I think it's fine for this to be incidentally playable. But if there's no sort of plummet, although there should just be both anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so I think this is fine as is. And if there's not a plummet, fix that.
Mm-hmm.
I would still kind of like to see a slightly bigger spider for all of these control and mid-rangey decks because like otherwise I'm basically taking my turn 3 off to make a 2/3 who blanks your 2 power flyer but doesn't do anything for your larger flyers in that, and a slightly larger spider I think would fit into those plans more for me,
Mm-hmm.
or a slightly smaller one who I can play for even less mana. Like the difference between this being a 3 mana 2/3 and a 2 mana 1/3, it certainly is a difference, but it's
In
not the
terms of its utility, goes down, but not by as much as the mana cost goes down.
right. Like paying one more mana for a 2/4 is pretty huge for those decks, I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Or paying 2 more mana for, I mean, we've seen like 4/4 vigilant reaches in common. I'm not saying that's what this should be, but that it's I think I really like the idea of just a basic 3 mana 2/3 spider in a set. I just don't think this is the set for it.
Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts, Calibur?
No.
Cool. Let's move on.
Like
We have.
okay, I will say I don't know if I agree with what Cleo just said, but I'm not gonna like go against it.
No,
Mhm.
I think that it's okay that we disagree on the card. I think that that's fine. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
Righto. All right. Our next card is the Staff of Yavena. It is 2 and a green for an artifact equipment. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Equip 2. So a lot of the stuff that we talked about with these equipment in general is a lot have been how do you get value out of the ETB? Because all of them have been doing ETB effects. And the one that I think we had the most problem with was the white one, which destroyed target creature with power 4 or greater. We had a big problem with how swingy that was, how niche that was, and how that caused problems when artifacts in the set are meant to be supporting draft decks that synergized with artifacts.
I think that's a similar case here. Slightly less so because this isn't in a civilized color.
Yes.
So in that respect, it is less of an issue, but you'll still, be playing it with civilized colors, like we were talking about with Lay the Foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And so those sort of decks will still want to play it on curve theoretically. And there's also just the fact that players will want to hold it up to use the ETB, and that'll be more relevant in this set than in most because of civilized, but it still won't always be relevant, and so people will just be holding the dead equipment in their hand.
So it has that design kind of weirdness that we were talking about before. It also still has the very, very, very swinginess of it. Just like if your opponent's not playing very many artifacts or enchantments, this card is just horrible. And it has the issue of just being a main deckable artifact and equipment, or artifact and enchantment hate, right? A lot of what we talked about with, I believe our problem was with like the white artifact enchantment hate card, the red artifact hate card, was just that they're pretty good, and they send the signal of, hey, you're gonna be your stuff that you're relying on for the strategy is going to be able to be destroyed. And this is saying that, but even more so, because it is potentially main deckable in a way that those other cards weren't as much, right?
I disagree that it's main deckable. I actually don't think there's a scenario in which I think the scenario in which this is main deckable, your deck is so bad that it's not relevant. Like
I think the scenario in which it's main deckable is dependent on the draft, actually.
Okay,
if you feel like your draft can support multiple civilized decks, then you may make the decision to main deck it. Whereas if you feel like if you're playing like sealed, or if you feel like your draft
of course you don't do it in sealed.
Civilized, or if you feel like your draft pool isn't supporting civilized so much, then you don't main deck it.
So I'm really conflicted on this card. So I feel like the best way to compare it is to like Slice and Twain, or the one from Shadows that investigated when it disenchanted. Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison. And in comparison to that, I do like it. But the problem is it doesn't read that way for me. Right?
Yeah.
Because you look at the card, fair. And the flashy part of it, the part you look at is, oh, it's an equipment. And so because of that, but maybe I just have to get over that. Maybe this is the kind of card that is it's actually kind of sweet that you have your investigate or your card draw instead as just a 1/1 equipment that sticks around, and so you're only playing this for the disenchant. But just like the issue is that the equipment side of it is so flashy, and all of the other ones we have advised to push towards.
Yeah, like if it were arm, which is sort of an equivalent to investigate, but it creates a +1/+1 token, then it would read like a naturalize, and you would feel better playing it.
Right.
Now, obviously, that still isn't the same as investigate, because investigate is something you do in the late game when when you have a lot of excess mana, whereas an arm token, you will often want it much earlier to get your creatures relevant or doing whatever you need them to do. But it is more comparable. The point remains, this is an optics issue as much as it is anything else.
What green effect do you want to see on this?
I mean, I've never been just a fan of the forced cycle in general.
Oh, so just skip the green one because there's no civilized in green. You actually don't need it.
Well, I don't. Maybe. I think maybe there's definitely an argument for just. Sorry.
You could put I mean, that'd be kind of redundant, but you could put +1 counter on a creature.
Well, this could be one of the pump spells. This could take the spot of a pump spell.
Like just be a sorcery speed pump.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't that count if it put the counter on the creature and then later on equipped? Like that actually is an interesting card.
Makes sense to me.
I'm perfectly fine with that, and especially if it's like staying at 2 or 3 mana, that's like super easy to curve out from something, or like even later in the game, just like play something, immediately pump it if it's like a plus counter. You know? Yeah. It'd be infinitely less finicky at the very least.
You could also do something like have it cantrip for a land, like reveal cards from the top until you reveal a land or something like that.
That's
or lay of the land, potentially. I mean, that does a little bit weird stuff with like the blue-green archetype, but you know,
make some number of treasure tokens, like 1 or 2. I don't know if you can make 2.
So maybe there's an argument for what this card is doing, and I'd love to hear Matt's thoughts on it actually. But it sounds like we're mostly thinking it should be other things. Do we have any other specific thoughts on this one?
Nope.
Cool.
I want to see more about this Yavanna character.
Well, we saw his or her Hydromancer earlier in the set in blue, so I imagine it's some sort of blue-green character.
Okay.
So we'll see that. All right, I think I remember that name right. But yeah, let's move on. We have Survivor's Will. It is 2 and a green for an enchantment aura, flash. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. So this is a functional reprint of a Theros card, correct?
Will that green player's blocker
Like
kill my
Feral Invocation or something like that?
creature? I guess it will.
Yeah, I'm not sure about having this and the 3 mana +3/+3. The more we look at it, the less I like that card. And I think that I would definitely look to cut that. Having Survivor's Will in the set is a powerful card and a powerful effect. And this could be a Dragon Scale boon instead. That might be more on theme with the set, or do we have to have an aura here?
Yeah.
It
Well,
may
no,
want to
because
be an aura.
no, you don't want to be granting plus counters willy-nilly because plus
Yeah, that's
counters are
fair,
used
that's
as a
fair.
marker on Endure.
Yes. There's also okay. That statement didn't mean anything. Zoo, didn't you have a card like this in your set?
Yeah, I had this exact same design in Hollows.
And do you have anything to say about it?
I mean, in that set, that was specifically meant to be a crossover card between the Flash archetype and the Voltron archetype. And not to say that there needs to be one of those archetypes for this card to exist, but this does seem to just be existing in a vacuum. Like, this is weird enough such that I'm stuck saying why. You know, like, just this is valuable real estate for so many other things, you know?
What deck is it for?
It looks to be for none of them.
Blue-green flash deck that doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder, did it used to be a blue-green flash deck, or
I mean, we can only
could
guess at this point.
be? You what? You can
Or
only
we
guess at this
just
point?
have to guess, you know?
Well,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, regardless of what it was, it certainly feels as though there's half a blue-green flash archetype and half a blue-green.
Well, we haven't
ramp
seen.
archetype.
We've only seen one green card that does anything with multicolor,
Okay, but
right?
we've seen 2 green ramp cards. Yeah, I'm actually gonna agree with you. Okay, you're right. You're right. We've only seen one.
Yeah, I mean, like the 2 green ramp cards we've seen are just like. One of them was just like, well, that's a card that you could put in every single set, and one of them was the 5-color do some ramping card. Yeah. So I just don't understand what this is doing here.
All right, are we ready to move on?
Yeah, cool. We have the
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Caprin Wayfarer, 3 and a green for a 3/3 creature, goat nomad. Yet another goat person. It has endure for green, and whenever a creature you control endures, you gain 2 life. So this is the second card that we've seen in the set that has a whenever a creature you control endures trigger. The first one was in red, if I remember correctly, and it pinged the opponent for 1 damage. And a lot of what we talked about with that card was the fact that it was a 3-mana 3/2 with an efficient endure cost, which meant that it was just kind of going to be played in every single red deck that could pick it up. It was just an efficient creature, you know.
We talked about how there were a bunch of endure creatures that were lower than that, and so I suppose the idea is that you play the endure creatures, but then you don't start enduring them until later. But that's not how it's going to actually play all the time, because you'll want your creatures to be larger so they can survive combats and just be dealing more damage. So having triggers off of endure on high cost cards isn't always going to work out very well.
Sure. Or sorry, what I was gonna say was with that card we recommended making it a little less powerful by default, so that it is more of a synergy piece. So you do have to build around it a little bit more. But with this card, that seems like I think the numbers are already arranged for that correctly here.
Yeah, I think this one's fine. I think it's just like the issue that I was saying. It's 4 mana, so you're going to have endured some of your creatures already, and unless you built with a lot of endured creatures, this won't get like I would guess it'll get on average one other endure trigger than itself,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine, but it'll feel a little weird at best.
Perhaps. I mean, like, what's the is there significant problems with waiting for this to hit the board? Especially
I
like if
just
you have this in your opening hand with like something else. Are you willing to wait, and is that going to cause
I'm
problems?
I'm really just not convinced that this is what the Endure deck wants to be doing.
That's true.
You
I
don't
mean,
think so?
it's flavorful for the idea of endure, but not exactly for the play style of it.
I mean, it's
Uh,
like what is it called? It's red green endure, but we're thinking that's I'm thinking that's just like it's an aggro mid range deck, right?
Well, if black green is in fact mid range, then a enduring life gain common creature who's like fairly well bodied would be quite good in a deck like that.
Mm-hmm. But I'm saying for red green.
Right. For red green, I mean, what makes it? It's on flavor, right? The art's excellent, and it
that's
makes you very
excellent.
difficult to race.
I think the name could use some work because it heals, and just a Wayfarer isn't something that necessarily heals.
Well, I like to suggest because he's a goat nomad, he could be like a go mad wayfarer,
Oh my god.
because, like because he goes mad when you wait. Never mind.
No,
But I do wonder if the effect is what the green red deck wants necessarily.
They probably do want to be a little punchier than this, yeah.
I
Like
agree. I agree.
and what we're saying is that this isn't blitz aggro, like this isn't balls to the walls, hit him hard as fast as possible. This is build up a board, pay some mana. Now your creatures are giant, and you start just being able to control the board that way. But if your goal is eventually to like control the board, be attacking in with these big, beefy things, what is the life gain doing for you,
Well,
right?
what if instead of it being on endure, it was more like the cons common lords who just cared about if there's a counter on it.
You're
I
saying for
agree.
this
I
design
think
slot.
that's yes. I think that's a
Yes.
good idea.
Yeah.
Although I do have an alternate idea for its trigger that would kind of feel better for the late game because it's so transient, but would definitely have an effect to the same. Well, would have a similar effect in that it protects your life total. Whenever a creature you control endures, untap it.
Mm. Mm. That'd be
What do you
cool.
think about
I
that,
mean, that
Cleo?
would feel really
It,
awesome.
that feels awesome.
And you
I
can
mean,
only do it once. It doesn't have the same like I control the board now forever thing that
if
Vigilance
if it
does.
was a
Right.
if it was like there's a lot of cool things that you could also do with the card. In this is another card that when I look at the card in a vacuum, I'm like, you know what? I actually kind of like the idea behind this. I understand that you would have to save all of your endure triggers for him when he's in your opening hand, but
Mm-hmm.
that play pattern, like there's something cool and fun about that. But then I again look down what my pairings are,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't feel
And you're
correct to the same.
realizing that you're just losing so much tempo.
Right. Whereas on the other hand, like if he was more of just a fat life gain, and a bigger body, because we've seen some pretty big green bodies with kicker recently, with a fat life gain, who's going to not necessarily appeal as much to the green red deck, but appeal heavily to the black green deck, and then play with other +1/+1 counters in that deck. Then he also becomes very attractive. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that this card could go,
Mm-hmm.
and that this draft is really close to working for me, but just isn't there yet.
I mean, it's also possible that this slot just doesn't want to be, like an Endure tribal card at all.
Yeah, that's
Right? Just having a
ties into what I
single
was saying
tribal
earlier.
card at common seems fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool.
Anything else?
Yeah, no, I think we can move on. Our next card is the Sand Crasher Gilla. I lobbied my complaints about that word last time. But it's 2 green for a 3/3 with trample. It's a lizard. When it enters the battlefield, another target creature you control gets +3/+3 until end of turn. So this is a sorcery speed buff that we've been talking about. And first of all, very appealing. 4 mana 3/3 trample is not a bad body. and then just being able to get this big tempo bonus of on this ETB effect is really cool. And one thing that my mind first went to is the idea of, oh, I give my creature +3/+3 until end of turn. That's perfect opportunity to endure that creature, right? It's safe now. But this costs 4 mana. Like that's
I
not
don't
impossible to do
actually
on the
know
same
what you're
turn.
saying by endure. I don't know how the two necessarily work together.
It's just like a psychological. It's not unsafe to attack with my creature now kind of thing. It's something a bad player would care about.
I see.
You know.
Well, I'm unfamiliar with that.
I'm very familiar with that. Like my first thought is, oh, if I'm scared to endure or something like that, this helps me with that. It's the same exact reason why they did that in Origins with Renown. They had a green creature that buffed another creature on ETB.
This is an interesting card. It's like pretty close to being a 4-mana 3/3 haste green creature.
I think it's a little bit better than that.
I agree that it's a little better than that, but like that's like kind of the mental comparison that I make with
Sure.
it. Right?
It's also double color weight.
Absolutely. I'm not saying you can't do that.
Yeah.
I think the more that I'm looking at the card, the more I like it, especially for green red endure. But then again, I look down my archetype side. Like you know what? I'm gonna stop talking about the archetypes till we get through everything. In a vacuum, I rather like this card. I like the art for it, and I like the flavor text.
I don't know if I really understand the art.
It's like erupting from the ground.
Well, no, I understand what's happening in the art more or less. I don't understand how it connects to the mechanics.
Oh, to giving something else +3/+3.
Yeah.
It's
Is it like
it's
supposed
abstract.
to be riding it on its back for a turn, or
more just like
something like
green. I am big, so in my presence you are big.
that?
We
I
are
think the flavor
together.
text could say something to communicate that if you
Oh,
wanted to keep
totally.
the two connected, but it currently doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on.
Yeah, I'm good to move on.
Cool. Our next card is Spawn of the Guardian. It is 4 and a green for a 5/5 beast. And a beast it is. 5 mana 5/5s at common. Historically pretty darn good. Right?
Yeah. That's
So
really good.
I'm just gonna put out there. I would like to see this in the spider swap places. I'd like to see this be a giant, huge reach creature, and the spider be a 3-mana 3/3.
Huh?
We know that you were talking about you wanted there to be this big reach creature, this big defensive body for the ramp decks.
Right.
On the flip side, do you think there's a reason why this shouldn't be where it is?
No, I like having a large, cheap, easy to cast.
Well, I was going to say something when we finished with green, like an overview of it. But if you'll notice, there's only one more card after this in green, and we just like 3 ago we were at 3 drops. There's only 4 cards in green above 3. I think that's a little
that's fair.
light.
Yeah,
it's really
no,
weird.
Really good point.
Yeah.
As for this card itself, a 5/5 for 5 is I think second only to 4/4s for 4 in the straight up vanilla curve, which is really, really good. And yeah, that's all.
I think this is a little weird. Just in terms of, I think if we're going to be having these ramp archetypes, I want the like good ramp targets to also be the exciting ramp targets. Like me looking at this, if I'm saying, oh, I'm gonna play the ramp deck and I'm gonna play a lot of 5/5s because that's the efficient option. That personally doesn't really excite me, and I think especially when there is this mechanic that's heavily featured in green. I know we keep talking about it, but I think that'll be a lot of the problems we talk about is that we're not seeing a lot of things that are not just endure and random nonsense, random good stuff.
Right.
This just like I don't understand why I'm getting efficient rate on a creature when there's this whole mechanic about like making my creatures big. It's like there's a mechanic about working to get a big creature, and then there's just this. Yep, it's a 5/5.
I actually think one of the things that you said that I really agree with is if there's two archetypes that are revolving around, um, if there's going to be two archetypes that revolve around the higher part of the mana curve, I don't want my great creature to just be a vanilla creature. I want to have something that feels more attractive or plays with one of my mechanics. Like we have at three colorless double green, we've had 5/5 commons that have abilities. It doesn't have to be like an insane ability, but it can.
Not 5/5s for 5.
Yeah, we had the formidable elk. I mean, his ability was like if you have 8 power, something gets trample, or I don't remember the exact wording on
Was
it.
it a 5/5?
Yes, it was a 5 stampeding. I can look it up. He was stampeding. I know he was stampeding, and you like rarely triggered his ability.
I can't type.
Stampeding elk herd 5/5.
Yeah.
It was. Yep.
Oh, double green, but still.
Right.
Yeah.
I did say double green. I did say double green.
Ah.
But my point was that if we do need to have a 5/5 for 5, we could do that at double green and give it a minor ability that makes me feel more paid off, such as a 5/5 for 5 that if you have a treasure counter, he has trample, right?
There's
Yeah.
actually
So then, like,
there's actually something pretty specific here. Dragons of Tarkir was the set that Stampeding Elk Herd was in. Dragons of Tarkir was a set rife with larger creatures, and its removal was suited to larger creatures.
this is very true.
So there are certain numbers comparisons in Dragons of Tarkir that don't exactly equate to other sets.
Totally true. And in this set, from what we've seen, this is actually very large. From a lot of the removal that we've seen in this set as well, is going to have a very difficult time taking down a 5 toughness creature. I don't disagree with that at all. In that this is a very real payoff. In that, like, you aren't just going to fight this down. Your best black and red removal that you're high picking are these like 1 mana and 2 mana efficient removal cards. So he is really hard to remove.
I mean, the big red burn spell does kill
right.
this, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, but you're trading even mana, right? Like,
well, it's
you're
the
not
one that
getting
like
tempoed
rebuys you a little bit of mana, but who says you're gonna get anything out of that?
And the black one is the instant that costs 5 as well. But I think that I agree with your point that I agree with your point that it is not a different that it is a different set. I just meant in terms of precedent that you can put something small on it if you're gonna keep the card, and having it be like the example that I gave was if you have a treasure counter. If you own a treasure, it has trample. Was the example that I gave because, well, I mean, maybe it can be even less than that if you have a treasure counter item.
I think caring about a treasure is actually a pretty poor thing to do on a 5-drop.
Sure.
Because you want to use your treasure to cast
your 5-drop.
Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
Well, and also it's a little weird in that
that points you to the archetype.
It's a little weird in that we know that there are treasure counters in the set. How many cards did we see with it at common? 2?
And they were in blue.
And they were both in blue. I think it was like 1 in blue, 1 in black.
I think there was one. There was one in at least one of the colors that I looked at. Yes.
I think it was 1 in blue, 1 in black.
Was there a red one?
I don't remember 1 in red. No.
One?
There was 1 in red. It was the aura, Lifelink aura.
I know there's an uncommon green one that makes one, and a black blue uncommon that makes them.
But basically, what I think we're getting is that it's just kind of what treasure counters are doing in the set, where they are. It's kind of confused.
Yes.
And especially like we're looking at green, and we kept saying, "Hey,
Wait, are
wouldn't
these treasures or gold?"
They're gold. Sorry, they're gold. But you know what we mean.
Yeah.
And we're looking at
clarified.
Sure. What was I saying? Yeah, we're looking at green. We're saying like, oh, look at these archetypes wouldn't these archetypes love some treasure? And we're not seeing any of it in green, the color of ramp. Maybe that's just like because of the weirdness that causes with Civilized. I think that the idea of gold counters in this set definitely needs to be thought about more. Because there's maybe there's some problems in implementation, I think, and potentially some problems in just like what that does. You know?
If you were to expand treasure in the set, you could just pretty easily solve the issues that that Cleo had with Disciple of the Delta by replacing that with a treasure.
Oh, sure. That could totally be a treasure slot. Or gold.
Yeah,
Gosh
yeah.
darn it.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things to consider here. We can't exactly say
Yeah.
what to do per se, but I think we've said enough.
Yeah, let's move on. Our last card is the Dune Tromper. 4 green. Green gets you a 6/6 creature human nomad. It has Endure for 1 and a green, and when it endures, it gains trample until end of turn. I at some point
like
we
this.
mentioned that isn't it a little weird to have wouldn't it be weird if we had Endure on a large creature? We were saying, hey, mostly Endure should be on your low drop creatures.
I think this is
I
the
like this.
exception.
You think so?
Uh-huh. I think this just feels like it feels. I just like it overall. I think it feels really good.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's a situation where it's because it's already a very relevant body?
Yes.
And when you are enduring, you're kind of enduring for the idea of it's going up even higher in toughness. You're just making it so much more hard to kill, and you're trampling in that turn.
Yeah,
Right.
I think the trample is super relevant to making it feel like the enduring on a large creature matters because trample says, hey, that whole other 6/6 you already paid for
Is now
that
better.
is also more relevant
Yeah.
than before.
Okay. And I think a big part of it is that when you're plopping this down on 6, you're also not plopping down an irrelevant blocker. You know, this is a massive
Yes.
blocker. You are likely keeping yourself alive for another turn to get that turn to endure.
My only question would be, I don't know if the endure deck actually plays this. I don't know if it just goes up to 6 at all.
It
I
might.
I don't think
It's probably
the Endure
fine
deck
if it
plays this
doesn't.
card. I don't think that that's a bad thing, and I think that
Yeah.
maybe even looking at maybe reflavoring it, the card might be good. Like I like this art, but what I like about this card, for better or for worse, is because there's so much Endure. Having something that says, "Hey, I can do something else with Endure. I'm not just cheap, efficient threats. I'm also just a way to gain trample. Like the gaining trample 1 turn is actually, I think, the better part of the Endure than the counter on this. Not that the counter is
I agree.
irrelevant, because it's clearly not irrelevant, but that essentially the card has a guaranteed 7 damage coming in. That's pretty big. And that is, when we talk about payoffs for the ramp deck, for the both green, white, and green, blue, this card is that. This in my mind is not for the other Endure decks. It is specifically for those decks. And so because of that, I almost want to see this be like what is the green guy who fought against and killed all the other nomads? Like the guy who
flavorfully differentiate it from all those other ones.
Right. This is the guy who, in my mind, and I might be wrong. Maybe he goes in the Endure deck, but in my mind, he's the one who doesn't play with the nomad friends. He's the one who decided
The
to get
lone
civilized.
lone
He's the one who endured
rhino man.
Yeah. He is the one who finished his voyage and found paradise. You know. But very much so, he should. I think as such should feel differently than the other ones. And I like that. I like that the turn you can also like choose to not give trample to him the turn you think that they're going to chump block.
Sure.
And like, okay, well, you're clearly like you have to chump block this turn, so I'm not going to give him trample, or this is the turn I'm going to give him trample. But the turn that you think they're not going to chump block, I'm just going to wait on the Endure here because that's so much damage in the following turns. And maybe that's like not, maybe that's too subtle, right? But
some
it'll
people will
probably
definitely use that, but some people will not.
It'll happen every once in a while, I think.
Yeah, I like this card. I like that this exists as a top end. I will admit that the way that I think about design, I wouldn't have designed this card because I would have designed my top end for the other non-Endure, quote unquote, green pairings to not have Endure. And so choosing to make the top end for the other decks the same type is like kind of strong flavoring for green. And so like I like the card.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all we have to say about the card.
Definitely. So now we can talk a little bit about green overall. We've continuously talked about kind of like not seeing I think with that card, we're seeing a little bit more of what maybe green-white is going to be doing. But green-blue, we're kind of confused about, I think, other than the one, the aura, the land aura. We're like, okay, yeah, blue-green, woo! But everything else, we're kind of, yeah.
And if green white is supposed to be ramp, then it would want the Cradle of Civilization as well.
It would. So you need, I think there definitely needs to be some other ramp-ish card, just so that there is like enough for those two archetypes that are supposedly doing the same thing. You know,
So things
or
that
similar
are
things.
missing,
I mean,
other than archetypes, there was no plummetty effect. There was a naturalized effect, but we said we didn't like that. And there was obviously, we said there was a dearth of high drops.
mm-hmm.
Do we think that Endure makes up for lacking high drops?
It does and it doesn't. So, I mean, most of the Endure, if it turns out in playtesting that people are frequently like doing a bunch of Enduring all at once, which is how it would appeal to me more, of course, but I don't think will happen as much, just because there's that nice tempo bonus of using it earlier on. But if that is happening, then it's like, okay, it's a late game mana sink. But I think as is, we're seeing a lot of Endure 1 cost, Endure 2 cost, and that's more mana smoothing, right? That's more I work that in and around my curve.
In green, yeah, did we see any? I think the only two, other than the last one, had Endure G.
Mm-hmm.
Which is just too early to have any sort of effect on the high curve.
Yeah. So
no, I agree.
Something to think about. And when we think about, actually, wait, never mind. I think any other issues we had were more with individual cards or like kind of critiques that applied to two cards.
Right.
Yeah.
Or arrays.
I mean, in general, I'm kind of missing what blue, white, and blue, green are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, this just feels like a generic blue plus 3 Endure cards. I mean, did I say blue? I meant green.
Yeah. Well, so some work to be done still. I think we're good to move on to now Colorless.
Yeah.
Common Colorless.
So starting with land?
There we go. Yep. Alright, so the first card we have is the Azurite Ruins. It is a land. It taps for C. And for 3 and tap and sacrifice it, you can return an artifact or enchantment card at random from your graveyard to your hand. So conceptually, I like this a lot. It's a land that's going into any of the different civilized decks, where normally we might see like a lot of, oh, hey, there are these colorless slots that are being picked up by these different decks because white and blue and black are all doing civilized stuff, and that's where they need to get their artifacts from. We're not seeing that as much because of those colored equipment that we thought were such a good idea. So even this, though, is saying, or is kind of bolstering that effect back up, saying, hey, this is a colorless slot for the artifact and enchantments decks. I really, really dislike at random here.
I agree to a point, but I also think this type of effect is pretty specific and often playable in eternal formats in ways that you might want to consider more in depth if you didn't have something like at random.
I mean, I just think it makes the design unappealing.
I agree.
Because like, there's a lot of enchantments or artifacts that you could be returning that aren't useful to you at that moment. Like, what if you return an aura and you don't have a creature?
No,
you're just like, that's
I agree.
awful.
there's a card this is directly referencing that does this for creatures. I don't remember off the top of my head what set it's from. I believe it's Shadows.
Well,
Is my
if
guess.
you return an aura and don't have a creature, you still can't make civilized because you don't have a creature.
Yeah, but
so.
the non-aura enchantment, you could still play it. That's still
Mm.
something you can just use your mana on.
Haunted Fengraph is the card that's referencing, right? And yeah, I think I like the card without it. I don't think you actually need it. And three mana is a hefty amount.
Mm.
The question then is just, is this something that we want at common? Is this an uncommon ability or a common ability?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I think there honestly might be maybe some utility in making this, keeping this a common and making it worse, just as a like, hey, you know, pick this if you want to feel safe in what you're doing.
So like making it 4 mana non-random.
Yeah. That it's just this, it's once again yet another signal that's saying, hey, it's okay. You're going to be able to keep civilized. You're going to be able to build it so your deck is doing that. You know, like players often enjoy that. Yeah, exactly. Even when most of the time it's just kind of sitting there tapping for C.
Yeah.
And this isn't like a multicolor format as well, like a significantly one. So, you know, that's not that big of a downside, I don't think. Like, if you're just playing white, blue, civilized, you're not like, oh gosh, you know, I can't support this sea land. It's going to ruin me. You know, but yeah, and exactly, but blue-green doesn't play this card, so everything's fine.
Sure. Moving on.
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm good, yeah. All right, we have Evolving Wilds. It's Evolving Wilds. Even the existence of the blue-green deck, I don't think actually affects how we talk about this card. Yeah, exactly.
It does have flavor text. That's new.
Ooh, flavor text. All right, now I'm going to talk about the artifact we have next. It's the Hops Granary. It's 1 mana for an artifact. 2 and tap an untapped creature you control and sacrifice Hops Granary. You gain 4 life and draw a card. So this is an artifact for the civilized deck that you get to play on 1 mana, especially if you're like one of the slower ones where it's like, oh, I'm not really gonna have a turn 1 play. This is pretty good for that. I think it's a little inelegant.
A little bit.
It's a little.
You know, like there's a flavor thing going on here. It's like, oh, the creature that you tap works the granary.
I also think it's just kind of important that this sort of thing be represented in this set at
this flavor.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also kind of weird that like, okay, so I'm a civilized deck, so I'm playing this so I can get civilized.
But then I'm tapping down one of my blockers.
But then I'm tapping down. Well, I can do it at the end of your turn.
I think I know what Cleo is saying.
Get to
sacrifice it.
I don't get to crack my granary until I have another artifact in play, basically. I don't actually get to cycle it. And so there's a part of me that's like, maybe there's an effect it can do. I don't know. Like, I'd almost rather have like a Fountain of Youth, which is an awful card. And awful to play against. And
like just something that taps for small amounts of life.
Yeah, now that I'm saying it out loud, I actually don't like that idea.
Well, I was actually going to suggest that exact same thing. I actually think that would be a good idea.
Well, maybe it is a good idea.
Well, maybe one of those things where it's like it has one ability that gains a tiny amount of life over time, and then it like kind of a similar ability to this, but like more just like 5 and tap and sacrifice it, draw a card, or like 4, something like that. Where it like still has the kind of, I actually kind of enjoy the, well, I got this better artifact now, I can get rid of this gameplay.
All right. What if it had something like 1T, tap an untapped creature you control, gain 1 life, and then like something and sacrifice this draw card?
I don't know. I just find the tapping an untapped creature you control, I find it so finicky. As if it's going to be like this 1 mana artifact that I play on turn 1, just because like, hey, that's a way I can use my mana in this artifact enchantment deck. I want it to kind of a little bit be fire and forget. You know, I don't want to be.
You don't have to tap a blocker. You can do it at an end of your opponent's turn.
Yeah, but it's still like I have to think differently about. I can't. You know, it's a little bit high maintenance for what I want.
That's fair. Also, the art, the cat is very central, and like if you could just shrink that down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just saying there's some sort of infinitely simpler version of this card that exists and is good and is fine.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Any other thoughts on that one?
I'm good to move on.
Cool. Our next card is the Tiller's Ads. Adsy? Aids?
I don't know.
Whatever. It's 1 mana for an artifact equipment, so another really cool pickable 1 mana artifact. Equipped creature gets +1/+0. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you may untap target land you control. Equip for 1.
That's really
This is
interesting in a way that I
interesting.
don't like.
This is very, very weird. I'm kind of guessing at the intent here. What else in the set has creatures attacking and caring about mana? Oh, it's Endure. But I can't even wrap my head around how that's supposed to work.
You
have to
pay for
stack.
Endure and then
You have to
untap
stack
it.
the triggers. Yeah. And maybe people other than me will get that intuitively.
It's kind of weird.
I don't know. I honestly think there's probably more likely that this was just a top-down design.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It's like a tiller's
Like
tool,
it's a farm
like a
tool.
farmer's tool.
Yeah. Untapping the land is like cultivating it or something.
Right.
I
It is
think
certainly confusing enough that I'd rather it just, if the intent is that it's for Endure creatures to make them quote unquote free, I'd rather it just directly references Endure.
or just like add mana or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh no, it could actually just add mana of a land you control.
Oh well, that's less common though, because then it needs to have it not drain. No, it still would. Even if the intent is for it to work with Endure, they would still have to do that.
When does Endure read?
It's an attack trigger. I'm saying it would totally work with that, but it's just one of those mana draining at phases. I'm pretty sure is something that they don't have matter at common ever.
Sure.
You know, like on either side of the equation.
I would say you can only spend this mana to pay for Endure or other abilities of creatures you control. And then they would do it because I mean it's a little bit wordy, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that just still makes it hideously complicated, for common.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I think this slot should just be an equipment that does equipment things.
I like the thought of this, but I just don't think it works out very well.
All right.
Or I think it does work out fine. I think it doesn't read well.
No, it does not.
I like the thought it doesn't read well. I agree with that.
No. All right.
It's fine to have some cards that don't read super well, but just be wary of it.
Yeah. Let's move on. We have the Traveler's Amulet. It's Traveler's Amulet. Does dual duty for... It just supports the whole set.
Traveler's Amulet.
Like there's a 5-color archetype. You just pick 5 of these. Go to town. I saw it work in a draft once. It's fine. Trust me.
Okay. Was it an early Bakoa draft?
No, I don't have Traveler's Amulet in that set. Do we have any actual thoughts on this?
I played like 3 of them in my Civilized deck, and it was excellent. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was a little bit awkward one game where I both needed the land and the Civilized, but for the most part, it does exactly what you want it to, and the flavor's on point. So
Speaking of totally fine reprints that fetch lands of any color, I did actually have a point about the flavor of Evolving Wilds that can we go back to that for 1 sec? So normally the flavor of Evolving Wilds is that the land is changing on its own, whereas here the flavor text says that it's the empires are doing the changing. So in addition to just having actual flavor text, which Evolving Wilds never does, it is flavor text that implies the opposite of the way Evolving Wilds is usually implied to operate.
Mhm. Which is a statement.
Hmm.
I personally, I think a cool one.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Notable.
All right, so Edge of Empires.
Yeah. Move on. We have a wall this time. Edge of the Empires, 2 mana, gets you a 0/4 artifact creature wall. It has Defender, and it has Tap. Edge of the Empires deals 1 damage to each opponent. Activate this ability only if you control a discovery. If I remember correctly, I think this is the only explicit discovery synergy that we have had at common. Correct?
Can this just be
I don't
civilized?
remember any of them.
I know that sounds like awful, or can it just be if you control an enchantment?
This is just so weird.
Yeah,
Well,
like
I mean, I
Yeah.
will play this card in a lot of decks because it gives me half of civilized, 2/3 of
Oh
civilized.
gosh.
And if I get the third half, I get my discovery. I
I
would just kind of like it to. I like honestly just like let the ability be.
Or
I
just
like
get
abilities
rid
to
of
be
the ability.
activatable. Well,
what'd you say?
that's interesting. I don't hate having this ability. We had a 2-mana 0/4 Desert Matters in Amonkhet, and he did. It was nice that he was a blocker who did help games end. So like, why can't the ability just be if I control an enchantment? But on the other hand, what if he was the 2-mana 0/4 Defender Reach that we saw in Consulate Skygate? I like having a Defender artifact wall that is going to wheel to go into my Civilized decks, and having it have either
where
and
it
having it have a
pulls
relevant
like
ability.
triple duty.
Yeah, and if it
yeah.
has reach, that would kind of fix the issue that you had with green, with where there wasn't a
Certainly.
green reach creature that would easily wheel.
It certainly fixes that, and actually like almost makes the spider go into the green-red deck, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think
No,
the
certainly
spider
not.
being main deck playable in green-red
Or
And
green
it
black.
could go into blue.
You know?
right.
Yeah.
But I like the card. I like the art. I like the
Although
name.
art is
But
fantastic.
having it only activate on discoveries, there's just so few discoveries that I think you can afford to. Essentially, I think you either need to make it do even more when I have a discovery, or
Yeah, I think the
or
abstract
make it,
of it is just too abysmal.
yeah, or make it just care about enchantments.
Yeah.
Because if it cares about enchantments, then it's
It's
essentially a civilized
effectively,
ability.
Yeah, and I'm saying that it could literally be civilized, only activate if you have civilized, but it actually is like easier on the brain. I think
it's weird.
maybe I'm wrong. I think
No,
it's easier if it doesn't.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, okay, here's my thought process here. I think if it had civilized, that would be really weird because it does both, or does 2 of the 3 conditions. Right?
Absolutely.
It's almost like
I think
not
that's
putting it on there. But if it says just enchantment, then it once again it still just begs the question of, wait, why isn't this say civilized? I think it's weird in both cases.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
That's reasonable.
No, you might be right about that. The more we talk about it, but I do like it being. I like this card being playable. I like this being a solid defensive playable card that can go into my civilized decks, that I can be able to get into them, and it gives me 2/3 of the equation because you kind of do need that. You
Which
kind
is
of
so valuable.
If you actually did that change, then you would just put up a poll, like which one of these feels better.
yeah. I played my share of both of those cards. I played my share of Tangle Wall, Tangle Root as well. I played my share of 2-mana artifact defenders. And because you played Wall of Tangle Root, Wall of Tangle Core, whatever it was when they gained reach, you played that in non-green decks in that format because it meant you didn't die to the Infect deck. Like you legitimately would play that. It was an artifact that blocked Infect creatures multiple times, which was a huge issue because you couldn't. It was very hard to block them if they outsized you. It wasn't like an ideal card, but I played my fair share of them. I like cards that do that, and I like that because of the synergies we have this. But I'm repeating myself. This is when I'm supposed to stop talking. Cool. Yeah.
Let's move on.
Let's move
Our
on.
next card is the Prophetic Prism. It is 2 mana for an artifact. Or we've seen it before, but I might as well read it out because I started. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and it is 1 and tap, add 1 mana of any color. I think
Seems
just kind of like Traveler's Amulet, I like what this does.
I feel like this is a card that could be reprinted in many sets and have good, interesting synergies in all of them.
But I mean, I especially like it in this.
Yes.
I agree. Yes.
It's cool stuff. All right. let's move on to the next card. We have the Gilded Idol. Sick biblical reference here. It is 3 mana for an artifact, and it has 3 and tap target creature. So this is like kind of a colorless removal spell, but not really.
Yes.
The power level
Can this be
is
better?
what?
Is that okay?
This is bad.
Yeah, could it be a little bit better?
I mean, I feel the repeatable cost is obviously like the most important part of determining the power level, I think.
Oh, certainly.
So would just that going down to 2, would that be like would that be exactly where that wants to be, for example?
I think there's a lot of little things that you could do.
You know?
Going down to 2 would probably be good enough for me in a lot of the decks. Dropping Gilded Idol to 1, mana cost still 3 repeatable would actually probably be fine.
I
in
mean,
this
we
format
saw a
because now I
lot
have
of 1-mana artifacts though.
Right. But like this is the 1 mana artifact that I would much rather play than the green storage because it's going to stay in play the entire game, get my civilized online, and then become a removal spell. Like I would rather have that in a control deck than the green storage if I'm specifically if I'm playing civilized.
I think
or
oh sorry.
Or you could tap for mana, right?
I mean, well,
Or it
we
could
do
be-
see Manolith as the next card, but
Or it could be indestructible and have hexproof.
no.
It's a Gilded Idol. You can't destroy those, right? They last forever.
Except they totally do in the Bible.
Yeah, they did destroy that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Hmm.
If I remember correctly,
flavor.
Moses was not happy. All right. Also, alternatively, maybe just costing 2 on the main. I think from like a design perspective, there's also things to think about, like, you know, what's the optimal for making sure the actual cost is like that you do it some of the time, but not all of the time. You're not feeling oppressive. It's hard to know. I think this needs testing.
In theory, it could even be a functional reprint of Mugga Beer from Lorado.
That's true. Yeah, like you mean with the gain life downside?
Yeah, 2 to play, 2 to tap, and gain 1 life. And its
The
controller
opponent gains 1 life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is cool from like a religious flavor.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that certainly makes it a lot better in like a control shell.
Sure.
Which is appropriate here, I think, definitely. Well, what I was going to say is I think this requires some testing. Maybe make it a little too good so that you get the testing on it. That's my favorite strategy.
All right, ready?
Yeah, we're moving on. The next card, it's Manolith.
I actually do have something to say now.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen Evolving Wilds, Traveler's Amulet, and Prophetic Prism.
And now Manolith.
And now Manolith. I think that might be going a bit overboard.
Yeah.
Even in a set with artifact themes and a 5-color archetype. Especially because, you know, the 5-color archetype can't totally be on the back of the artifacts because the artifacts are going to be taken by
other
the
colors,
civilized
yeah.
decks.
Well, okay, so that's actually almost an argument for having this much. Right? It's because these are cards that are pulling double duty for a few archetypes.
I'm just not in general a fan of Manolith. Maybe I should be.
I mean, there's a blue-green 5-color ramp deck. They will totally play this card.
Since there's 2 ramp decks in theory, that Manolith makes more sense than having
like Prophetic Prism?
Both of Traveler's Amulet and Prophetic Prism.
I think Prism is definitely the one that stands out as the one least needed.
I
personally
don't know if I agree, because Traveler's Amulet doesn't function very well for a civilized deck.
Yeah, I actually agree that the Traveler's Amulet's actually the one that I think is the worst of them. If we're specifically trying to support ramp and civilized and not other archetypes, then that's probably... I know it's like kind of the best of them, but because you have to sacrifice it. I don't have to sacrifice the other 2. I got to keep them.
Which I guess is one of those situations where it's interesting, but not what is desired by the player.
Exactly.
Yes.
Which is not what you want at common a lot of the time.
I mean, I like the flavor more of Traveler's Amulet of the 3.
Sure, I mean, Traveler's Amulet's a good card, but I think
that makes sense.
Could be an issue in this set because of civilized. It like the arguments that you had against the Granary, it doesn't feel like it does anything if you're supporting civilized.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree with that.
Yeah, so I guess given that you are trying to support multiple things with it, I can't say for sure that you shouldn't have all of these. But I can definitely say it feels weird, and also that there should just be like more, or not necessarily more, but there should be enough support for the 5-color archetype
In those colors, in the blue-green colors,
yes, exactly,
that the less is needed in the artifacts.
right,
Yeah, take some tension off that.
right.
I can see that. Some pressure. All right, are we good to move on?
Yeah.
Cool. We have the Wildfire Walker. And I know exactly what Cleo is going to say about this card. Has 3 mana for a 3/1 artifact creature construct with Hearthstone art.
And art I just don't think is fitting.
It's not.
I didn't even realize it was Hearthstone art.
Other
So
than
this set
that,
has Hearthstone
sorry.
art.
Yes.
Sure does.
I drafted and played this card because I needed to. It was pretty awful in my Civilized deck, except for the fact that I turned on Civilized. So
Which is kind of what you want.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would much rather have a 3-mana 2/3.
Yeah.
Sure.
Would you
rather have a
also
Bronze Sable?
A 2-mana 2/1.
2/1?
No.
I'm unsure.
I think you would rather have a 3-mana 2/3.
No,
then
this.
Then a 3-mana 3/1.
No,
no,
then
I think
then
that-
a 2-mana 2/1.
No, I'm just saying, would you rather have a Bronze Sable than this specifically?
Yes. I think.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So, but you don't necessarily.
Oh, especially because this dies to that 1 black 3-drop. Like, oh my gosh.
So what I want to say is you don't necessarily want to have a curve filler that like every deck will pick on, even like 7th pick in Colorless when you have the Civilized deck. You want the Civilized deck to be able to take it.
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, I think this could go up, but I think it only needs to go up to like a Bronze Sable rather than a 2/3, which is a good bit better.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or a 1/3 for 2.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are any of those.
With how many of the other cards we are pushing towards being in multiple decks, even though I make the comment that I'd rather this was a 2/3 or a 2/4 or whatever, I'm okay with some number of the cards that can last minute enable your Civilized are not really for that deck. Like I am okay with that, right?
Yeah, I also think that's fine.
Because you also need to give something to like the aggro decks and the endure decks, and I'll play this card in all of my aggro decks. Absolutely.
I actually like the idea of this being a 1/3 for 2, because the Civilized deck is a defensive deck, and so that gives it it enables Civilized and acts as a defensive ability, but it's still not that good.
Right, but we are talking about pushing the wall for that deck, which is the card that will deal for them. Whereas this card this card actually gets picked up by a lot of the decks of the table.
That's true.
And so maybe if I was picking the mana cost for this, I would just look at what is the mana cost that every deck is going to need to have interaction on. Let's give them something.
Mm-hmm.
So in this set, is that 3, is that 2, or is that 4? Where is the point in the curve where you need to be able to stay on, or you're probably losing the game? And so when your draft is like kind of below par,
the format looks a little slow.
Which is why you would have this instead of like a Bronze Sable.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think that's correct.
That's reasonable. Does it then want to be a 2/3? Or should it be a just terrible so that it'll wheel like I was talking about earlier?
Yeah, this is probably fine as is actually.
Okay, just the art then.
Just the art. Maybe we started talking about how the design is bad because the art's bad. We're biased against it from the start.
It's a 3/1.
You know what I mean. Stats are design, Calibur.
I agree.
Let's move on to the next card. We have Babylos Sentinel. It's 7 mana for a 5/7 artifact creature construct. I like this.
I like the art.
The art's good. Yeah, totally. I think I enjoy this.
Were his stats changed or something?
From what do you remember him used to be?
I don't know. When we drafted, this guy went around the table, and he just seemed really like I was playing a civilized deck, and I was very unattracted to this card.
No, it's
Because
No,
not
I'd
it's
even
always
rather-
been a 5/7.
What?
It's always been a 5/7. I feel that this is more
Okay.
just like a ramp deck card, which we saw that the ramp deck is not particularly supported in the ramping to something department. So, but maybe this wants to be like a 5 mana slot or something.
Yeah, it's also okay just to have some cards that are subpar.
Yeah.
That looks nice.
Exactly. I think this is fine. Could go somewhere else as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good for like a GX civilized ramp decks.
Just
With
like
considering it's green and the two civilized color or the two main civilized colors that
are the ramp decks.
are the ramp decks
Yeah.
is going to happen pretty often.
Yeah.
So I think it's good for those.
Yeah. All right. I think we're good. So we've finished talking about colorless. Obviously, colorless it doesn't matter as much when we talk about like structural problems. There's not a colorless deck, for example. Curve doesn't matter so much. But we did talk a little bit about maybe a few too many artifacts that are fixing, and Traveler's Amulet looking a little bit out of place for that reason.
And
What do we
just
think
for
about the
interaction
total
as well.
count of artifacts?
I don't see a problem with it.
There's
How
9.
many are we at? We're
There's 9. So that means at common there are 14 artifacts and 2 cards that make treasure. So like 15 artifacts, let's say.
I don't know how much is wanted to enable civilized at all.
It's hard to know. It really is. I think this is a good amount. I personally expected one more equipment. I also just really enjoy equipment. So maybe something like Traveler's Amulet can turn into another one of those. But otherwise,
Yeah, like a higher cost one.
yeah, like a beefier one, totally. Other than that, I don't see any problems with the colorless cards.
I'm okay with them.
Yep. All right, so we've now finished with green and we have finished with colorless, and now we're going to look at the uncommon plus discoveries. We're going to discover a world of new, or something like that. Imagine
Sure.
that sounded better.
How are we going to organize this?
I was thinking no rarity filter, but color filter, and then just control F. Or so still on CMC, then just control F discovery.
Sure thing. So,
I need to get up and use the restroom. I'm going to do that.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's fine. Do you want us to continue talking while you're away? Or nothing?
You got to. Please do. Please do.
Okay. So actually, one thing that's interesting is that I forgot about this white creature that whenever a discovery enters the battlefield under control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Does our evaluation change after having like gone through and had like looked at all these different synergy decks that we made a lot of attention with, and then seeing this and going, yeah, discoveries, eh?
well, I mean, it's just a 2/2 already.
Mm.
And so I think it's fine. Maybe I don't entirely understand the question.
Well, we were saying like, oh, maybe the discovery, the ASFAN is so low that you don't really want to care about it. You know? And I would actually say that, yeah, the answer is no, it is fine on this card. Because you do want people to realize that it is a mechanic that exists. When you can't actually put your theme at like the actual cards at common, still make it feel like it's at common. And I think this is the correct
Right.
usage of that, because it's not relying on it to be a useful card. I think when we were criticizing the wall, it was more like, oh, but it's like, it's this really, really, really useful effect of becoming a win condition on having a discovery. Aw, that sucks. this is just a bear.
Right, exactly.
And honestly, maybe that means we would prefer to actually have another card at common that's just like, hey, it's a generically good creature that reminds you that discoveries exist. You know?
Makes sense to me. I don't know if that's necessary, but I think it could be fine.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to our first one. So we're looking at the uncommon discovery, Recruitment. It is 1 and a white for an enchantment discovery. The reminder text for discovery is as follows. As this discovery enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, add a progress counter. Stop after you've discovered. So then we see one text box that is marked 1 and 2. So you'll get this effect when it enters, when you get the first progress counter, and when you, at the first upkeep after playing it, when you get your second. And then after that, we see a second text box with a symbol of like a chemistry potion. So that's representing the discovery that you get after getting
this is so old. It's
3
obviously
counters.
alchemy.
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, alchemy is what I should have said for the flavor. On this one, the thing you get when it enters and on the first upkeep is create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with vigilance. And the discovery is, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So for 1 and a white and waiting a little bit, you get 2 tokens and some repeatable aggressive stats. What do we think? Or what do you think? Because Cleo's not here.
First thing I want to point out is I don't know what your tokens were like at common, because I wasn't there for.
There was a 1/1 white soldier with vigilance.
With vigilance, okay. I
Yeah.
just want to say,
On
don't make
2 white
don't make
creds, I think.
too many different types of tokens, since you also have another different, like a red token. Just
a
be careful.
red rogue with haste. There's also the 2/2 blue Lamasu.
There was the elementals as well.
Oh, and the red elementals. Oh, well, those ones stood out. We talked about that.
Yes. So just make sure you don't go overboard on the different types of tokens. So to the mechanic, it's a little odd. I don't know if you're valuing it correctly, because so 1 and a white, create 2 1/1 tokens is a almost standard playable spell. Like Raise the Alarm is absolutely standard playable. So these have vigilance, but they're a little slower. And so that it probably wouldn't be standard playable, but it'd be pretty close on its own just from 1 and 2. And then with 3, it gives you a permanent further buff on the subsequent turns.
Like a plus counter that never goes away.
Right.
So this is quite strong.
Yeah.
And actually, if I remember correctly, I think this one was one that people weren't actually like giving a lot of credit. I think like it was looking a little bit unappealing, and that's because I think it's obviously a lot less impactful in limited.
I see.
Right, where you're losing a lot. It's like efficient, but it's slow and not impactful. Sure. Which is weird, because normally in limited you're looking at, okay, efficient and fast, or slow and impactful. And this is neither of those two things. So I think from the perspective of limited, maybe there's some variant of these numbers that is like, okay, it's a little more appealing, a little more interesting, a little more powerful, and then yes, isn't just a very efficient value engine in constructed.
Well, okay, what I was kind of getting at was that I feel like it'll be tough to balance discoveries in a way that they are reasonable for constructed, but also still appealing with the way they're formatted here. However, I suppose what you can do is, right here you have a 1, 2, and then discovery. You could have more intermediate turns even.
I mean, I imagine he's trying to avoid that on the uncommons.
Sure, I'm not saying for uncommons,
but yeah.
Well, I certainly. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back.
This card certainly looks attractive to me. Like, this is a card that I see a fair amount of value over the course of a game. Getting that +1/+1 every turn, It's not just exalted; it's whichever creature I want it to be, and getting 2 power out of it and playing it, especially when I get to play it early, it seems like a pretty sweet card. I'm not disagreeing with your points. I'm just saying like how it looks if I'm evaluating it in a pack.
Mm-hmm. Uh,
I guess there's a lot of development knobs, but they're knobs that don't really turn as much as typical.
well, especially on a card that makes tokens.
Sure.
Like that's a little bit locked down. I think the easiest thing to change here, and the thing that does affect its power, is of course the final mode.
Yes. So another thing I think it could. Um, I'm wondering if perhaps it could just not have a counter when it enters the battlefield. Would that make it feel too weird? Would that make it like
we did
feel
just
bad?
have sagas.
Right?
And
therefore,
I think that would be a departure that would probably just cause more annoyance than it would fix any problems.
okay.
I think I agree with that.
You know. Yeah, I mean these are harder to develop, I think, than sagas, just because the ability sticks around. It's not, you can't analyze it as like, oh, a sorcery in 3 parts. It's a sorcery and then an enchantment.
Right.
So yeah, maybe something to think about. I don't have any like final, this is definitely what you should do with this on this card. Maybe as we look at more discoveries, well, maybe I'll be able to come back and say something. I don't know. But are we good to move on? Yeah.
Yes, I'm good.
So our next one is Medicine. Another uncommon white discovery. 2 and white gets you an enchantment discovery. It's 1 and 2 is put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And then the discovery is creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have lifelink. From a design perspective, I love this.
I like this.
Except it does mess with Endure. Right?
Mess with?
Because Endure is another one of those renown monstrous plus counters mean things.
Okay, so
you actually
like
just can't do this
deck,
design.
Yeah, if you're a white-red deck, you'll have you might have red creatures marked as have a +1 counter on them when they actually have not endured.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite good with Endure. I mean, to point out that almost like suggests that I play it, activate it twice, and then still have a third creature. So I've had 3 creatures in play for 3 turns. I'm not sure if that comes up. Like I should be winning anyways at that point, or it's helped me break through a board stall and the synergy is nice. That's probably because I didn't articulate it well. What is the situation in which I use the first mode and 2 creatures that don't have? Is your problem with it that it messes with the marking for Endure?
Yes.
Or okay, then my point was mute. Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it all boils down to, oops, you can't actually do this design. Nothing we can say after that matters.
I do like it. It just you can't.
All right. So it looks like there are, no other. Those are the 2 white discoveries, 2 at uncommon, which seems fine. Okay. If I remember correctly, I think there are 2 at uncommon for each color, and then a smattering at rare and mythic. Yep, that seems to be the case for blue. Our first blue discovery is writing. I hope we discover reading too, otherwise I don't know how I've been doing this review. For 2 and a blue, we get a discovery. It's 1 and 2 is draw a card, and its discovery is instant sorcery and discovery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. I adore this card.
This is quite cute.
I really, really like this. I think it is both balanced and fun.
Well, I think the only question that I have is it too good? And I don't
is it
think
too good, period?
Is it too good? That's the question that I ask.
It's
because it's
fairly good in like combo decks where you're comboing out on turn 5. But that doesn't
Is
sound
it?
like a problem.
no, I don't think that that's a problem. As we talk it out, it seems good. And if I'm asking that and the answer is it's not too good, then the card is accomplishing what you want it to, because it's a value card that makes you want to draft discoveries early, go into them, play with the mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
It features a character who is very like central to the story of this,
Oh
while
yeah.
making me feel so. Yeah, no, the card's a home run.
Let's
Absolutely.
go, Mabram. You draw those cards. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this one?
uh, no, but I'm not seeing any other discovery in blue.
Ah, okay. So we're not seeing another one. We're instead seeing a Discovery support card, which I guess we should still talk about. Noble Steward, 5 blue. Sorry, 5 blue gets you a 4/4 Lamasu. It costs 3 less to cast if you control a Discovery, and it has flying and prowess. Um, Obviously we did just see that there is only one blue Discovery. This is very weird. Like, when is this going to happen?
And when it does happen, I get a 4 mana 4/4 flying prowess.
Whoop-de-doo. I
I
mean,
mean,
that's pretty
good, but
good,
still.
actually.
It is very
But
good.
it's like
It's very good.
based on the idea of how often is it going to happen, it feels less good.
Yeah, it's not.
It doesn't seem like it's going to happen very
Especially considering we only saw one in blue,
Yeah, we only saw one. That's
and it's an uncommon as well.
yeah.
It's like
It's like it's saying something that is wrong. It's saying, "Whoa, discoveries are in blue. Draft them," and that is wrong.
Yeah, no, it's very misleading. I agree.
Like maybe like just make sure that maybe there was like a problem. Maybe there is another one, but we're just
one
not
sec.
seeing it in the control F. No, there is not. There's only one. Yeah, that seems like a problem. Do we want to move on to black?
Yeah, I'm good.
So now I'm just like hitting the enchantment button. It's a lot easier. Huh. The first one I see is Anatomy. That I love as a name for a discovery.
Especially a black discovery.
Oh yes, totally. For 2 and a black, we get a discovery. Its 1 and 2 are return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So kind of similar to what we were seeing with writing, where it's you're drawing cards, but in this case, specific cards, but with the condition of having to have them in your graveyard, which I think is fair and cool. And the third, the discovery is whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So the synergy here that's intended is obviously you've regrown these creatures. You can now play them again. When they do eventually die, each opponent will lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. And you're just kind of playing this in a strategy where you have a lot of creatures that are dying. I think this is not completely there, though. Part of what I get a little bit weirded out by is I very much want to synergize that second one with like a token strategy, which sorry, actually I guess the problem isn't like in a this is fine in like an aristocrat strategy, just not in like a full go tokens everything strategy.
Are either of those strategies supported at all in the set?
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily something that has to be the case for each of the discoveries.
No, just asking.
But no, neither of them are. No, at least in black, they're not. Like there's some token, there's like go wide aggro and white red and such, but black is certainly not interacting with that. In the set, it's just acting as a value piece for something like green black, where it's, you know, I'm going to get some of the dudes I played earlier in the game back, and I'm going to build up enough of a board that even if I'm losing, I'm slowing down how I'm losing. You know, which is like not amazing.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
But it's not terrible. I mean, maybe it's not even. Maybe it's not
I don't think this is a
actually.
big enough issue to be worth changing the card.
Which issue?
The tokens issue.
No. I was just saying like, it seemed to signal a strategy that doesn't, or like, never mind.
I understand where you're coming from with it. I just don't.
Yeah.
It's like almost signaling an aristocrat strategy.
Yeah, a little bit. But
which
I think
doesn't
we
exist in the set.
yeah, but I think we just got to the conclusion that doesn't matter.
Like, if this is signaling an aristocrat strategy, then the last one was signaling a
Like Storm.
spellslinger strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the spell slinger strategy is in the set. There is a red-blue spell stack.
Yes.
Mm. Okay.
And I drafted that card in it. As for this, I think it's just a good stuff card in limited. But is it good enough? I don't think so.
Good enough to just play in a deck?
To just be a card that people play. I
Sure.
don't.
I think so.
You think so?
Mana cost.
Yeah.
You reduce mana cost to 2 is probably fine.
Well, I think that's too good.
Hmm.
Like I said, discoveries are tough to balance.
Yeah. And changing their mana cost actually, like, even among other cards, is an insane change in how they're played. Just because, like, you play them like earlier in the game matters because they take place over multiple turns.
And I think for this specific card, having that is a bad idea.
Oh, certainly. I don't want people playing this on turn 2 and then going, wait, this doesn't do anything.
I have made a mistake.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, maybe in that sense, like, if we expect people to understand that you don't do that, which I think is actually fairly reasonable, then maybe reducing in a mana cost that would be fine.
I guess just for efficiency's sake, like, it's already as efficient as divination if you get it working, and then more so.
Yeah. So you guys are saying though it's fine, power level wise?
It's fine.
Okay, cool.
It's fine power level wise. I mean, it would be cool if every discovery had at least one archetype that like really wanted it, but maybe it's better that they don't.
It's just a restriction you can never really guarantee.
Yeah.
There's a lot of design and developmental restrictions on these. Yeah, alright, so I think we're satisfied with that one. Let us move on. Our next one is another black uncommon, Tyranny. Whew, cool name. 3 and a black gets you a discovery. Its 1 and 2 are each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So a total of draining 4 over the course of this card. And its final is, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card and lose 2 life. Well, this is extremely appealing. Just like, hey, here's some extra life. Now use that life to draw cards. What do we think about the balance of this? Because having to wait to get your draw engine, especially when it already costs 4, is very, very significant.
It is, but also it's not like it's doing nothing in the meantime. It's basically like each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. You wouldn't play that as a card in and of itself, but just for getting it for free, it's pretty good. It's essentially like, instead of drawing a card for those first 2 turns, you are playing
drawing and casting. Yeah, exactly.
It's an interesting card that I just need to test more.
Yes, I certainly think.
Like,
that we played, the life gain was certainly relevant, but me taking a turn off to cast it was like kind of sucked.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when we played those games, the one that I won, I stabilized at 1 life at one point, which means that the life gain literally kept me alive, right? I then later was able to gain more life off other black cards and trigger the back half of it. So I like the art of the card. I like what it's doing. I'm not 100% sure all the numbers are correct. I'm not sure if the third mode should have a May. Maybe it's better that it doesn't.
Oh, no.
I think this is already like leaning too strong, I would think.
It's really slow.
It is quite slow.
The thing is, like, if you were to compare it to some of the other actual draw engines that we get, you're talking about doing nothing on turn 4, right? And then not getting rewards for that for 3 turns. You do gain 4 life.
What's the rarity of that draw engine?
I don't know. I just played. I just played a custom game with Zeus set right a 5 mana draw engine.
At what rarity?
At uncommon.
At uncommon.
Yeah. So I think I think the constructed limited balance does matter a lot more on this card. I mean, luckily there's room here for extra color weight. This is expensive enough for that is very flexible with that.
Now, what if it were 1 black black and didn't gain you any life?
I think that's a worse design.
Okay.
I think gaining the 2 life is really fun with the drain.
So I did a Scryfall to see what similarities we have, which is actually not very many, right? There's like Death Reap Ritual, Vampiric Rites, and Raider's Spoils are the only ones that like really actually draw me a card every turn, or can, and none of them actually say draw a card every turn. So that does suggest that. I mean, the effect is super unique to get it uncommon. That is certainly true. That is certainly true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't say anything else about it. I think I like it. I wouldn't be surprised if it needs to be nerfed a little bit. For mostly, I think for limited. I think this is fine for constructed, though I can be wrong.
I agree that it's probably fine for constructed.
All right, let's move on to the next one. There's no others in black. We have a 1 right off the bat for red. We have Metallurgy, which is pretty cool. 1 in a red gets you a discovery. Its 1 and 2 are target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. And the discovery is creatures you control get +1/+0 and have menace. I think the flavor on this is a little weird.
Well, so what's the flavor of all discoveries? Like, what are you doing before you've discovered? And
you're just kind of like doing the first things that lead to the discovery. It's like you're trying something new out. You're in the first steps.
And I think from that perspective, this one makes perfect sense. Like, oh, we found some metal.
We learned how to be menacey.
Let's see what we can do with it. Oh, it's pretty nice. Let's just give all of our dudes it.
Well, I mean, I like element. I'm just saying like the connection of I have swords equals I have menace, which is certainly not an association the rest of Magic supports.
That's true.
Menace is usually I am a scary person or monster.
What's that?
I said in Magic is usually I'm a scary person or monster.
That is true. But I do think the +1/0 is the part that really feels like a sword, and it just feels like menace is like mechanical that's attached to it. It doesn't feel like a disconnect for me in this.
Well, if it was like First Strike, it'd feel connected to me.
First Strike would be, well, first of all, kind of nuts on the last mode. Unfortunately, but yeah, I do agree with the flavor. I do, that would be nice. Well, so one thing I actually want to say against what I said before is when you hear about like the trope of, oh, this ancient civilization started winning the war because they showed up with iron, like they were the first in this region to discover iron swords, and that's like, oh gosh, these people are scary because they have more advanced swords than us. That actually kind of works if you're familiar with that, I think. So it could work out. We talked only a little bit about the mechanics of it. Mass Menace is fun, often. I definitely do not think this is overpowered.
What's the card that does this? Growl War Chant?
What was the question? Was that to me?
Just to anyone.
To anyone specific. Okay, there's Growl War Chant, which is attacking creatures you control get +1/0 and have menace for 2 red-green. That's not bad.
Yeah. So maybe this isn't too good.
Little too good. And also the last ability is just better than that also because it's not exclusive to your attacking creatures. Oh, you know, actually from a design perspective, I think it should be restricted to your attacking creatures.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
And that does obviously make it a little easier to balance as well. So yeah, maybe also this is one that's going up to 2 in a red or something, or maybe red. It's just a little weird, but still fine. You know. But we have no other problems with the design.
No,
no other comments. Art's good.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think the art is perfect.
It's cool stuff. All right, let's move on. There is no other red discovery. Cool. Let's go to green. We have agriculture. That makes perfect sense. 2 in a green gets you a discovery. Search your the first and second is search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So yet another one of these cards that's drawing 2 cards. This one drawing lands. And the discovery portion, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life. I love this card.
It's okay.
I think this is well designed. Like the feeling, the flavor is perfect. I think
The flavor is perfect. I'll give it that.
3 life is a lot.
3 life is a
is a
lot,
lot,
but
but
it's
also
hard to
it's-
keep feeding.
It's not online until turn 5.
Yeah,
At the
It's,
earliest.
it's also an uncommon and not a common. We've been looking
Yeah.
at comments for a lot today, and I
It's
think
true.
I think I'm a little bit hungry, and mentally I was like, "You can't put that in a comment." And now I'm like, actually, you could put this on an uncommon. Okay, cool.
Yep.
I mean, the cycle, the formula that black, green, and blue has of like 1 and 2 are essentially drawing a full card, and 3 is an effect that is impactful over a long game. I like that formula. I like that on these cards, and I like this card is very appealing.
You know, so one thing I actually don't like about this is the existence of the middle turn, where
Yeah.
because presumably you're playing this on curve, and you're like, well, okay, I already played land for the turn, doesn't really matter. But then you go to your next turn, you're like, well, you still just get another land. Then you're like, should I wait a turn for the 3 life? Should I play my land for the turn? It's a little awkward. And then you're like,
I would
oh,
agree.
now I have the bonus finally. Let's play a land once per turn now. Get 3 life once per turn for
It's basically a
3
question of
turns.
that second turn, whether you want to play a land then.
Like, it's almost always going to be worth it to play the land, I think. Unless you have a very, very awkward hand.
Or if you have just another 3-drop that's worth playing, because you didn't play it on turn 3, because you played 3 and then chip.
That's true. Yeah, that'll happen fairly likely. I think maybe just like the last ability should be something that takes into account the idea that you will have continued to play lands after casting this, and have that not be a feel bad. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, definitely. I don't think it's that big of an issue, but I'm not too high on the card anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe something that like asks you to spend mana, or something that asks you to sacrifice lands even. Like there's nothing like in the set in general that would stop you from doing that, I don't think.
Don't like that. It could be, oh, yeah.
Oh,
I
but
guess
it's like
paying mana
it's like
makes sense.
sowing and reaping. You know?
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I
think that would even
put
improve the flavor.
sacrificing lands isn't something players tend to like to do.
No,
It's
I'm
true.
not a huge fan of doing that.
I'm just saying there's options there.
Yes, I think paying
Or
mana
it could even be
better.
like sacrificing lands to find more lands, or I don't know. Like crop rotation as an effect somewhere here could be pretty reasonable.
Maybe.
You know? I mean, that's already kind of what the 1 and 2 does, but you know. I'm just saying there's more options to explore here. I don't think
There
this
are
is
options.
I don't think this is quite on the mark.
Mhm.
You know. Although it is very appealing to me.
Yeah.
It is very appealing to you.
All right, looks like there's no other green discoveries. So, are there? Oh, okay. A big part of why we weren't actually seeing very many. He does not have rares or mythics.
Makes sense.
Right.
That I expected those to be on there, but so in his set channel I've seen a lot of brainstorming for rare and or mythic discoveries. So I thought there'd be a little bit more than there were, but there aren't, and so we are done. So at this point,
There doesn't appear to be any multicolor ones, and if there was, we would have already seen them.
oh, definitely. So at this point, we should just talk a little bit about just kind of discoveries in general, anything that we didn't cover. We talked a little bit about like there's the kind of pattern of 1 or 2 is, draw a card kind of, and the third ability is something else. and we like
I think
that. Kind of Planeswalker-esque,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Are there any like effects that we expected to see on a discovery that we didn't? That's a hard question to answer, of course.
It's a really difficult question to answer because part of it is like you don't really know what to expect. It's kind of a new idea
Yeah.
in terms of, especially within this setting. Once you know that like writing is sweet, like well, what else do you expect? You expect reading.
Mm-hmm.
You expect with them being nomads, I expect things that suggest I'm actually building a structure. So I suggest the ability to build,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, like
Stone masonry.
architecture, maybe stone masonry. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I would totally kill for a
From
stone
having
masonry card.
played Civilization, which is like this kind of reminds me of with that. I expect things that take me from one age to the next age.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, like we saw with metallurgy, that's kind of the
Yeah, exactly.
Stone Age to Bronze Age or Bronze Age to Iron Age kind of thing. Yeah, like there's so much flavor possible here, actually, just so much. It just depends on like, cause like I really love that you can do these ones where it's like, oh, everyone knew that that was invented at some point, and then you can do other things. I didn't really think about that one.
Right. Like recruitment.
Anatomy. It's like, oh, we just know that that's how the body works, right? It's like, no, for a long time we didn't. I like that. That's cool. Yeah, I don't have any other general thoughts on discoveries. Does anyone? Are we good to move on from that? This is our final segment.
Yeah, yeah, I'm good. We can move on.
Yeah, at this point, we just are there any thoughts we have just on the set overall? We have looked at every single common. We should now be, of course, masters of this draft environment.
I didn't actually look at the blue-white ones.
That's your problem. You'll have to do your homework.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it seems reasonably well put together. Certain colors more than others. One thing that I was going to potentially argue for was and I think this could spawn a big discussion, is there a need for another mechanic? Because obviously a big part of that was the lack of discoveries at common. It made a lot of common feel samey. Like we kept having the same conversations about civilized. We kept having the same conversations about endure. Right? And obviously a big part of that was that we noticed and we pointed out that some of these other non-mechanic themes didn't really seem to be represented the way that they should. And once that comes in, I think the sameness, the sameness will fix itself out a lot better. But do we think, regardless of all that, is there a need for another mechanic?
I don't think there's a need for another mechanic, but I think you could definitely explore having and that might be beneficial to the set.
I would personally, I think that you can explore a lot of what's already here in more ways. Like I would rather see treasure or gold or whatever it is. I'd rather see gold be.
Right. Of course, there is like gold that you can kind of think about that as the fourth mechanic, if it's used more.
Right. I'd like to see a little more of that. If it's staying the set, I'd like to see a little bit more of like. I just think about like when you say does need another mechanic, I think about sets like, my English is a Monket, where black green -1/-1 counters like really felt like a mechanic because of how originally they were used. I feel like there's other things going on in this set where there might be enough design space that you don't need another keyword, and to explore those things. And if they lead you to needing another keyword, then to pick up that keyword.
I will say I don't like treasure necessarily in the set because, well, it can enable civilize and it can enable ramp and 5-color, but it also, it's something you want to use, you want to sacrifice it. Like we were talking about with Traveler's Amulet earlier. You want to use it and you can't do that if you're holding it to enable civilize. And also, there's just the fact that I don't know if it's particularly flavorful like this for the set. Like I know, of course, as someone who's pretty studied in these things, how it connects with the history, and it connects somewhat with like the stories that people tell, but I don't think it's that resonant for it.
Really, my assumption was the exact opposite. That when we think about gold, we often associate it with the ancient. You know, when we think about these old figures who had so much gold they didn't know what to do with it.
Well, okay,
You
I
know,
suppose that would be if it were exclusive to that flavor, sure. Like if it were just on cards of rich people, sure, but that's not how it would be used in the set.
it would be used as just this is what society uses to make
Right.
commerce work.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like that can be something where he does put the focus on, the bounty of kings, you know,
Right.
or emperors, as it were. I think that that's something that he can do. I don't know.
I don't know if it's right.
I think it's my opinion that it could work. Maybe this is something you need to ask like a wider audience about, Matt. I think the gameplay is fine. Like I don't think you develop around the idea that it's like it does interact strangely with civilized, but I don't think it's always bad. Like it's often like I was saying before, where it's just like you wait for yourself to have some other artifact, and then you use the treasure to even cast that artifact. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's probably fine.
Oh, so if you were relying on treasure as your common civilized enabler, and you were thinking that it would be used to cast other artifacts, then it would be a problem to have any sort of toughness boosting for civilized at common, because if, for instance, they had been damaged, they would then die.
I think we talked a little bit about that in the first one.
Okay then.
I think we looked and did we? I feel like the conclusion we reach is like, oh, there isn't any of that.
Okay then.
Wait a second. Huh. So I'm looking at common. Okay, so civilized is on 6 common creatures. That seems about right. Like maybe he wants to be on another. Like I feel like it generally wants to be on permanents, not spells. I'm not sure. Well, whatever. I mean, I have no other thoughts on the set. I am also exhausted by having a lot of thoughts on the set.
I'm pretty mentally exhausted, and I feel like a lot of the thoughts that I had from today have been discussed throughout it. I guess kind of I should like sum it all up. So
Sure.
just like a quick sum up of all of it is that I really like the flavor that we're exploring. On paper, I really like Discovery and Civilize and Endure and the way that they interact with each other in the same world. I feel as if the way that Endure is explored is very attractive to me. I feel like the way Civilized is explored, there's a few places in which it is struggling a little bit, largely through what payoff am I getting? How hard is it to get there? And was it worth it at all? In comparison to Endure, which is like, okay, well, I got my creature and I attack with him when I pay mana. I already had mana because I cast
Dead
him, so
simple.
clearly I can Endure. Right? And that's not a knock against it. It feels like all the pieces for Civilized are coming together, but aren't there yet.
Yeah.
In terms of our color pairs, it feels as if the Jund shard is very endury and is kind of missing the other pieces. Like the other pairs in those colors are missing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the Esper charge is very civilized, and the other pairs of it, like the Jund in this and Esper, don't really get along that well. Like playing in terms of the clarity through the cards,
Which is extremely flavorful. but not
well,
good
I mean,
for the
maybe
draft.
that's the intent of the set. Maybe you just commit to that. You say the world is two different empires, and you stop trying to support it more and print gold cards
You
of that. I
totally
mean,
can.
like you could do that.
That would
and that's
be
kind of sweet.
interesting.
Like maybe you just do nomads versus civilization. I don't know, but right now it feels like it's very close to working, and all of the pieces that I see that are working are super sweet. I just want to see that kind of fleshed out a little bit more, and to try a few more drafts with the set, which is good. If at the end of the set review we're saying we want to see more and we want to draft it, then you're doing something right. You know?
Oh yeah. Cool. Any thoughts, Calibur?
I obviously didn't see as much of Civilization as you guys did, but the little that I did see of it looked interesting, and it seems like a good mechanic. Endure I can't speak for how it plays, but I can say that the appeal of the cards looks significantly higher than what I would estimate just from hearing the mechanic. And just the set overall, obviously it needs work, but it looks good. Like, yeah, it needs work in every aspect, but in general, every aspect looks well done so far.
Cool stuff. Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that was said so far. Don't have anything special to say, so we will pretty quickly get out of here. Anyone who watched the stream or is currently watching the VOD, thank you very much for tuning in or watching. This has been a very long ride, and hopefully it'll be worth it. You know, maybe in a few months, Babylos will be the next cool, awesome set that everyone's talking about, that it's getting played in custom standard. Who knows? Good things are coming. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Bye.